Right, this is going to be another episode of Counterpoints. As you can already see, there's obviously a third person in the screen, isn't there? Normally it's just me and Maniac. We did have that one episode early on where I invited Yanko. But believe it or not, the actual thing I had to learn about this show is there are some shows, By the Numbers, a classic example. People know League of Legends. Obviously, I do Summoning Insight with Monty. In theory, you think when you do a show, the more the merrier, right? If you had a guest, you get all the attention. And certain shows, actually, I've learned sort of actually live and die on the rapport of the hosts, actually, though. And I have to say, from the feedback I've seen, I actually think people prefer our show to not have guests, really. I think actually, essentially, this show has succeeded in what I actually hoped it would be, which is, I could always tell Maniac was also one of those people where it's like, you can't get it all out in 30 seconds on the desk, mate. You want to wax lyrical. You want to make some allusion to some philosophical... Yeah, well, here's the problem, Maniac. They haven't got much time for that when the question is like, is Donk going to turn up on map 2? Like, there's, you have to give like a sentence there, mate. So I feel like in general, people like that we have the space to, go out there on the topics.
Yeah, definitely. It gets my frustration out of the desk where I have 6 minutes to make my points. And also, because you always bring all the spice and the craziness, I get to be all reasonable. Okay. I get to be myself. I get to be myself. It's all right. I can sort of put a little bit of vanilla on top of that fire, and it works pretty well. The balance is there. That's a yin and the yang. So it's been working out great. But I mean, whenever we get the chance to have someone like Chad, why would we not? Sure. Why would we not have someone like Chad?
Oh, don't worry. I am aware, Maniac. We are operating like the big brother syndrome thing where it's like, I get all the beatings for being too edgy and out there, and I'm the bad kid, and then you just get all the loveliness because it's like, oh, he's not as bad as him though, is he? He's better than his brother. So yeah, I get it. It's all good. I'll be the black sheep of the family, as it were. Obviously, our guest here is SPUNJ. Hello.
I was wondering why you invited me, Duncan, because you've got the sugar of Maniac, you've got the spice of yourself. Yeah. Am I bringing the salt? Like, what am I bringing to the table here today?
No, here's the thing, Chad. One thing I actually do think is quite interesting is whenever I watch talent, I don't just like listen. I also try to think things like what are they trying to do there, or what's the theme to how they do things, for example. And I've noticed the theme for you, Chad, I actually think one thing you and Launders have in common is you try on the broadcast, I feel like, to simultaneously do a bit of what I do, a bit of historical framing, narrative stuff. But the reason why I feel like you and Launders are similar is I get the sense you do that because you're an authentic fan and you're trying to sort of also get that across. Because to me, you're not just trying to be it's not like an American style, like I'm just a professional guy in a blazer, like here's the game, like they better do a better job. I've always felt like you always try to bleed in a bit of the fan culture and the fact that, like, for example, if people went and listened to the Katowice ones, you're about as excited about Donk playing as half the fans are. Like, everyone's hyped, right? Is that kind of your angle?
Yeah, I think like that's the key with doing all the casting and stuff, right? If you don't enjoy it, like if you don't actually enjoy it, why are you doing it? And I guess from the angle that I get to add, Alex is the hype man, but if there is a play that's unbelievable or a player that we've never seen before, and I'm there expressing a similar kind of sentiment, then that's essentially what sells that, right?
Yes.
So. I find that, getting to go out there and just watch the new generation of Counter-Strike players do what we definitely couldn't do back in the day is lots of fun, right? And to see the game evolve. We've been involved in Counter-Strike for a long time. Like the three of us have been doing this for too long, right? And you get to see what modern CS gets to offer. Of course it's enjoyable.
Well, here's what we'll do. I thought what we could do, since it's the off-season on this episode, is we could do like a bit of a sort of state of the union of CS, like talk about where some of the top teams and the players are, where we see them. So I thought, actually, let's jump into it. I've just teased it there. But I actually think a great topic, SPUNJ. Here's what the framing should be for this year in CS, but people have sort of missed it. It's like every other year, guys, it was very obvious like how the top end of the scene would work. Not only did you know what teams would be on top, but famously, yes, the top 5 on HLTV, depending on what year, is going to be some combination of Simple, Nico, ZywOo if he's there, Device. It was the question just became what order? Like, think how many years the discussion was just, is ZywOo 2 or 3 or can Nico be 2? Like that was every year. That was it, right? If you think about this year, guys, well, spoiler, unless things drastically change, Device and Nico aren't even on this list. Simple doesn't even play CS anymore. ZywOo is actually looking like he might not even get number 1, but he's obviously has a chance at it. And then the other two, Donk and m0NESY. Like, m0NESY was a guy before where like he'd be like low top 10 at the end of a year, and obviously Donk wasn't even playing. So our kind of like 3 big names out. It is a totally new game. It's not just the fact it's like CS2. Like, it's a new world in this point in time. So what do you think of that, Chad? How do you like living in a world where it's not just Simple ZywOo all the time and Nico cheeky peeking in at the end,
It makes that conversation at least more exciting, right?
Sure.
It can be more controversial as well because you can throw more names in the mix to be part of that conversation. But I think it's the 3-horse race is pretty clear. The second half of the season, I think we get to see if donk and m0NESY can really separate themselves from.
It's also dope that, like,
be able to catch
in theory, maybe G2 does level up right now. This is a perfect time to make the race super heated, right? If everyone could be in the final, that's the shit.
Yeah, that's the thing, though, and that's where m0NESY might be getting tanked, right? Depending on how this roster change actually works and what they do with MOUZ, they could actually tank m0NESY's ability to be able to compete. And look, sure, I'm glad that they replaced Nexa, but the conversation about, is that the only replacement? Is this the right replacement? How is this going to affect the team overall? Because m0NESY was doing the simple-esque hard carry performances, right? And that's what was making him exciting, was the same type of flashy plays. Whereas donk, for example, the thing that makes him so nice to watch is he has refined the mechanics of the game that it just looks natural to him. It's like second nature. And that's why we're sitting there talking about, oh yeah, his crosshair placement is this, or, you know, because just for him, he's just going through the motions of playing Counter-Strike as a 17-year-old obsessed kid knows. And we're sitting there breaking it down. For him, I bet he doesn't even think about half the shit he's doing at the moment he's doing it. He makes it look like a thing of beauty. But I think the second half of the season, I don't even know where we're going to be able to pin the best teams in the world, right? You're still going to have the same conversation with Spirit, Vitality, MOUZ haven't improved themselves on the bigger stages. That conversation will persist. FaZe, are they going to bounce back from a bit of lethargy now that the season changes completely in terms of how we have to ramp? Like it goes start into Cologne, into another lull, into Major, essentially, right? There's obviously other events along the way which people are going to want to win, but it's going to be Cologne and the Major, the big two that everyone are going to be looking to put in their pocket. So how is that going to affect teams and their performances? But I'm just curious to see how some of these teams come out of the break, because there hasn't been a blockbuster roster change season at all.
No, it's true.
No, I agree. Personally, I know players obviously have to manage like energy and stamina, and you have to take some sort of a break from the game if you don't want to burn yourself out. But I do think that if you're being clever, you might start way before the end of that break so that you peak during Cologne. And then maybe you give yourself like a few weeks where you can relax just a little bit. Like this structure you were talking about, Chad, the high of Cologne, then a bit of a lull, a bit of a calm down, and then going into the Major. That's like a U shape in terms of how important the events are. I think you have to embrace that. You really do. And if you're clever, you attack during the break, and then you maybe pre-plan ahead of time, hey, we might miss this event, or we're going to eternally agree that whatever IM this or EPL this or Blast this is going to be less important for us. We're going to take it a little bit more easy. That's what you do, because since we have such a tight race, not only for best team in the world, but best player in the world, what is going to happen is who peaks in these most important moments are going to, take the lead and take a gap compared to the rest. So this is the way I see it. You have Cologne, you have the Major, and I think whoever ends up winning, getting an MVP there, I think that this is the name that's going to end up at the very end. So I hope teams are ready to prioritize that.
I've got one thing I want to throw into the mix here, because people will have seen on some of, let's say, the less credible news sites. Obviously, this year, an undercurrent of the G2 story has been you keep being these leaks that imply m0NESY might leave. And I've heard, by the way, that is a real concept. There's teams out there trying to get him, and there's people trying to figure out how many millions does it take and what team would it look like. And so it's one of the things on these shows I've actually always tried to mention myself, when people have done that conversation to death of should G2 kick HooXi? Well, who should they kick? And, is Nico good enough? When people do all that, I always tell people the one mistake they make is we all act under the assumption that, whatever the rebuild of G2 is based around m0NESY. We all act like that's a given that he's there. And then it's who would you put around him in the squad if you're G2? Well, the problem obviously becomes if he leaves, first of all, your rebuild is you have to rebuild that. You haven't got much at that point. You had the absolute best player, as we say. Sometimes he's 1v9 in the game to carry you to these matches. So already you're in trouble. And then obviously the most recent one, if people don't know, before the implication was maybe he went to Cloud9. Obviously it was the whole Russian rebuild thing. It was a friend of his, leaked it on stream. And then now KRL, who admittedly he's from the French scene, so he doesn't have any connection to the Russian scene, I will say. But maybe he heard some things behind the scenes. Or by the way, spoiler, you know what? I'm just going to do it, Maniac. I'll just speculate. I imagine this is how KRL knows stuff. A pro player he's friends with, maybe even a French one, probably told him something. What happens is, the pro players see stuff themselves, they hear the rumours, and then someone's told KRL, and spoiler, like every regional scene person, is he going to sit on that? No, because their entire persona is leaking shit like that. So overdriving the Russian scene, Gaules in the Brazilian, it's just how it works, by the way. It is just how it works. People hear the rumours. So what I'm pointing out is, though, it's not like it's absolute nonsense. There's probably a grain of truth that maybe there have been conversations. So obviously that one was implying that Nico and m0NESY actually do the move from like 8 months ago and go to Falcons, which, by the way, I would say that would be such a level of spice. It would be insane, considering everyone hates Falcons, think they're going to fail. And I'll tell you what, if the best player in the world and Nico walk in the door, you're all going to fucking change your tune real quick. I'll tell you right now. So I just want to put that out there. I want to ask this question, right? What about a world where m0NESY might leave teams mid-year? That's a game changer, right?
Look, I think the conversation was interesting for a while because what we thought was an unbreakable union of Nico and m0NESY, like why would they ever not play with each other, kind of fell off because of how strugglesome Nico was in CS2 at the very beginning. So if you're m0NESY, maybe at some point, I mean, obviously you have this incredible respect for this legend of the game and you feel like you're going to grow with this guy in the game and you're going to win altogether. Maybe you get to a point where you start wondering, hey, like, is there another place where the grass is greener for me? Should I just hitch to a different wagon? But now, because I think Nico has already shown real signs of resurgence in his level, I do think this duo is now more valid than ever. And if I'm m0NESY, I'm probably reconsidering going on my own. I think that's enough. And mostly, if you imagine a world in which Nico might decide to be an IGL one day because of what happened in Dallas, and that's obviously behind the curtain kind of stuff, I do imagine that m0NESY would want to stick around with him. But both of them leaving, like, holy shit. Like, listen, already m0NESY leaving G2, for me, is the end of the relevance of G2 at the top level. But if Nico leaves, like, what are we doing? Like,
I mean, put it this way, guys. I just want everyone to take stock for a moment. Imagine you wake up and the move happens, right? We're just speculating here. And suddenly on HLTV, you know where they put the roster that exists? It puts G2's remaining active roster is HooXi, MOUZ, and Hunter. Like, that's not even, that team's over, mate. Like, that's not even a fucking, that's irrelevant. That team's, you're done. Like, you'd have to basically yourself sign. You're right, man. You'd have to, like, go out yourself and sign like HLT top player, like, instantly.
They cannot do that to MOUZ. They can't do that to MOUZ. Surely they cannot do
that. That would be wild, wouldn't it? I know. By the way, how bad would that would be like Alexi B levels where he got there and then Simple was like, I think I'm just going to leave the game, actually. Like, cheers, thanks, mate. I just fucking moved all teams and everything you can't. Come on. What do you think, Chad? What do you think about this possibility?
I'm still living in the universe where I think, or maybe it's hope, I don't know, that they make another change in G2 and HooXi goes. And Nico does take over the in-game leadership.
Oh, you're also, by the way, have you noticed, SPUNJ? Everyone has just agreed to that. It's like we all realized, like, no, there is another way. And now we've all realized we don't actually have to get a better IGL than HooXi. We can just make Nico it. We're all toxic as fuck now. Even though none of us actually know for it to work, we're all just in on it because what we've realized is it is sort of like cutting the Gordian knot, isn't it? We've solved the equation. The impossible equation has been solved. Just, we don't even have to get Carrigan. Just make Nico Carrigan. Like, I love it. I
feel like
I would do it as well, mate. Just for the novelty, I'd almost do it at this point. You know, for like the thrill of what would it be? You know.
Well, if Twister's going to do it in Liquid, I think why not? Like, Nico can definitely do it in G2, right? And if you bring in a player like Perfecto, for example, to fill the void of HooXi, then the roster change of MOUZ makes sense. Because
by the way, what a dark world that will be, though, Chad, where like fucking Glaive, Snappy, and Cadian look on like little like orphan children on Christmas Eve through a window, while inside Twist's device and Nico are unwrapping all the presents. What a world, bro! What is that world, though? You know, like,
yeah, that's pretty rough.
That's dark.
And where do they even go?
I know it's dark.
Fuck, aren't they?
They're all just going to be in Fnatic and Nip at that point in time. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah.
Oh God. So who's responsible for that? Like, who ruined it for everybody? Is that Device? Did Device ruin it for everybody? Remaining good as a leader in Astralis? Did he open that Pandora box? Now everybody's kind of considering the idea.
It does feel like it.
Ago,
yeah.
Exactly. A year ago, no one would have said. I mean, all the reactions from Device going to IGL were like, "Oh my God, no! What are you doing? He could be an IGL. Oh no, that's gonna be terrible." And then, like, hold on a minute, wait, what is actually working? Oh no, it's working.
It does feel like people are scared to say it won't work. Of course, the Device one did. You know, I agree. What were you going to say anyway about MOUZ, SPUNJ? What were you saying, mate?
Well, it might not work, right? But I would love them to at least attempt it. But the thing is, I still see issues with the roles if HooXi stays and they brought MOUZ in and then they try and force MOUZ to a player he's not. Because then that's where I think they could tank m0NESY and then m0NESY might consider leaving. Like, I don't know when his contract's up. But if I was G2, I would have re-signed him. I would have paid him as high as I possibly
everything
could.
You can.
He should be the future of G2. Like, that would be the best decision from that organization. Because, look, it's great to have Nico. Don't get me wrong. But m0NESY is going to be around for another decade. Nico might be around for another 5 years, right? So for m0NESY is the future of that. And the one thing that there's nothing G2 can do about is if m0NESY decides, I want to go speak Russian, right? Like if he decides, and there's so many good Russian players.
No, it's always going to be lurking in the background, right? You're always going to be thinking about it, That's the grass is always greener scenario anytime he thinks that, mate. Yeah.
That's the biggest draw right there. And also, I understand Bit's at Navi now, but I think if he ever had a realistic opportunity where he could play with Bit, they're always hanging out at events.
Oh, right.
They're having food together. They're really good mates.
Right? Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, if people don't know, they actually are pals, right? Yeah, because if you remember, that was where Bit got in trouble early on in like the conflict, where they had like a photo with her. I think maybe after kind of eats. I can't remember what event, but you know the one I'm on about. There was like an event where I think Bit got in trouble from his community. Yeah, they're actually like good pals, right?
Yeah, so that I think would probably be a draw for him to go.
Right.
But otherwise, like even because we've heard murmurs about, and even that interview that James gave, where he was like, "Oh, maybe Electronic will in game league."
Yep.
So if that's going to happen, then I can see James with he could even give up the AWP position, which sounds fucking.
It's mental, isn't it? How can that even be, mate? How can that
apparently want to spend money. Imagine if VP picked up m0NESY, brought him into the team.
But like, you think he would want to go? Like, would that be an upgrade compared to where he is now?
It depends on how bad this change goes, right? But that
Maniac, you're being too reasonable, mate. Because remember, listen, I do think Maniac, like obviously that m0NESY is quite young and inexperienced, so I'll give him some leeway. But all I'll say is this, Maniac, you're acting like as a young player, he's going to actually sit down like we are and look at the big picture of his career. What have I got now and what am I trading? I think young players often just do things like, do I want to play with that guy? Like, am I mates with this player? Like, I actually think Chad's got a decent angle there. Like, maybe sometimes they will leave a better project just to play with like the guy that was their mate for years or something.
Oh, Jesus
Don't you
Christ.
think so?
Yeah, okay.
It's kind of true, right?
We were all young. We all had dreams and passions. I know we've been there. Like, aren't these people supposed to be surrounded by people who are a bit more level-headed and like help them see like what Chat is doing about G2? If you're m0NESY right now, you have an organization that if they think just for a second will give everything they have to make you their just absolute hallmark player for a decade. Like this is an opportunity that is almost like a once in a lifetime.
No, I'm with you.
So, bro, use that, utilize it, use your influence. Maybe have a couple of ideas of what player can come in and say to G2, maybe, hey, listen, guys, I don't want to leave, but I'm telling you, if we're not getting this guy or this guy, then this is what every very strong player has been doing in every sport in the history of life. Like, Messi in Barca, fucking Ronaldo in Madrid. Like, yeah, I'm gonna stay, but you better get me this player. You better get me this defender. So that's what I would do if I was m0NESY up there. I would try to use my influence to get what I want in G2, to get the team that I can win with, and
all right,
Maniac, the actual king.
If we're starting the sentence, if I was m0NESY, I'd do this. Here's what I'd do, Maniac, and this is where I'm always on a different level to you guys. I'm always operating Game of Thrones deep within plans. Here's what I would be doing the whole time I'm m0NESY. Is, you just talked there, SPUNJ, about how he's like pals with Bit. It's like that meme of, like, used to be friends. I'm no longer friends with, like, a new best friend is this person, right? I would become best friends with Donk, SPUNJ, if I'm m0NESY. And what I would do is this, mate. After every big tournament, I'd sort of listen, it depends how I want to approach this. I could either do it subtly and just sort of, drop breadcrumbs, or I could just be aggressive. I could privately just sort of tell them, like, Shiro ain't shit, mate. You see with that fucking major? I'd be on that grind, mate, because I'll tell you what, I actually seeded this like a few episodes back, but I don't think people have actually sat down and realized, guys, this is like if s1mple and ZywOo had been from the same country and spoke the same language and could play together. Like, obviously, your mind would immediately go, well, why wouldn't they? Or when will they? like, Duncan and m0NESY are both super young Russian players who have no overlap in their game. And you have to feel like, listen, I actually do agree with the comment Maniac said last year. If you want to play this system, actually, ZywOo's probably better than m0NESY. But if you were making a new team, if you had these two players, you could sort of run fucking CS for like 10 years, potentially. Like, if I'm those players, I'm at least thinking about it, Chad. I'm at least every now and then, in a dark moment for m0NESY, I'm at least thinking in my brain, wait a minute, what if? Because I'll tell you what, if those two ever teamed up, isn't that like that's like some Godzilla shit?
So what's Donk now? 17 and Ilya's 19, right? So at some point,
and they've got loads of time for this.
They'll both be playing for another decade, right?
Easily.
So, but you would want them to get together at some point in the next 4 to 5 years, right? Like that would be the point in which you would want them to cross paths. But that right there, you bang on. And I think right now, especially with both of them showing this prime form, I don't think anybody will allow their powers to unite. Like, imagine giving that piece over. You're like, well, you've just fucked us all. Thanks, man. Like, there's no way Donk's going to an English-speaking team at the moment. I don't think he's English is good enough. But m0NESY going the other way could be a possibility.
Yeah.
But again, it would be G2's fuck up if that happened. That would be the most catastrophic player to lose in recent history if they allowed that to happen. So I hope we get to see a crossover there. And there's so many good Russian players. So you could have insane teams around them.
that also presume a downfall of spirit, right? Because if you're donk and if you want to win and your team is actually winning and they've already had Katowice and now who knows, they rock up in Cologne, get a trophy, they have the major. That also presumes that spirit isn't working out, because logically rather, donk has no reason to look for something else right now.
That's true.
They're winning.
We're not in a dynasty. We're not in a dynasty era at the moment, and I don't know when we will return to one. Right? Like at the moment, with the way that all these teams are playing Counter-Strike, at least towards the top, it's very similar. Right? There's obviously nuanced differences, and some teams are a little bit pacier than others. You don't have the crazy outliers anymore of the stupidly fast Furia with Art and the stupidly slow VP, even though VP is still on the slower end of the spectrum, but everybody's a bit more in between now. And it's like the chaos meta, and we don't have, it's who makes the decisions quick enough in those moments and who's hitting those shots harder, which is just the shitty throwaways we hear from players in the interview. But that's, everybody knows how to play Counter-Strike the current way. Nobody has redefined any of the elements like what Astralis did back in 2018, 2019. And that's why we don't have a huge separation point between any of the top 6 teams or anything like that.
Yes.
So we're not, I don't know what the break point for that will be. And if I did, I'd probably sell the idea for us to have like a dynasty era again. And it might be putting absolute superstars together in one roster just to be able to individually fuck everybody else up. Because right now, in terms of the meta, what could teams look to refine better? I'm sure we're not at the end game of using the smoke players. Like,
I mean, what you're basically saying, Chad, which I agree with, is essentially with the way CS2 currently is played, the difference is maybe in CSGO, we have seen it, you can have like a team with low firepower that can beat you and, you know, like a better... It feels like right now, if you could make like a superstar team work, it would just be unbeatable, right? They would just frag everyone off the server. It feels like what CS2 is a bit like.
Doesn't it feel like Spirit might be the team that is the closest to that?
Pretty close.
You consider like the runway that Zontix has as a player, like if Zontix actually just takes like that extra little step, now you have a triangle that no one can fuck with.
I don't know about you guys, but put it this way, that's the reason why on a lot of the shows when like people start to go down, like they weren't as up on Spirit anymore, I never got it, because to me, I always thought of Spirit this way. I actually think like in Vitality, the reason they can win is ZywOo can be the best player in the game if he wants to be. Obviously, m0NESY can like sometimes drag Z2 over the line, but you're not going to win as often. FaZe Clan doesn't even have a superstar player like that. The problem is, to me, the only one that has it all is Spirit. Like, to me, if Spirit players their real like top level get, no one beats them. That's why I actually think spiritually they should be the #1 team.
What they're missing is reps, though, right? Like they got iced out a little bit because they weren't in Pro League and they missed another tournament.
Chengdu.
Yes, and that kind of hurt them because coming out of that, they went studio event, sure, but they're still coming out as young players. Like, people have to remember the fact that even though these guys are so good, that they're not as seasoned, and that is going to come back to bite them in certain circumstances. So they're not just going to be the team that's owning everybody in all scenarios. They're going to have some wobbles. There's going to be some games where Chopper calls shit, where Zontix doesn't clutch. Then those are things that they are going to need to then build into their game for it to be stronger and stronger. So if this Spirit team continues on the path they're going, then maybe they can... I still find it very difficult to see us with this roster going into like a dynasty era, but maybe being the most dominant team. Because right now we can say that they're the #1 team in the world, but other teams can, like, I feel like right now, in terms of like the way the bracket shapes up, FaZe versus MOUZ, like that's one where FaZe are always going to have MOUZ in the back pocket, or right. And I like that, because from a narrative perspective, it's not just who the fuck is going to be the best team. It's who are they going to draw against, and how these matchups going to work. So that's more exciting from a viewer perspective. But I think with the reps, because Zontix is a very strong player. Yeah. And he is thrust into some of the most high pressure late round scenarios. So for him to have a couple of wobbles earlier in the year, I think he's only going to get stronger and stronger with more reps under the belt. So yeah, Spirit are the ones who have the brightest future out of all of the rosters we have right now, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's even scarier, because had they just been on a high since Katowice, you could always make the argument that this is like just an incredible winning streak that's based just off of momentum and confidence.
A honeymoon type period thing.
Exactly. Eventually it's going to fade out. Yes. What makes it scarier is that they've already had a couple of events where they got iced out. You're talking about, obviously, the game against Vitality in Dallas where they get absolutely spanked. That's a game where, by the way, donk has like a 0.88 rating, which we thought is absolutely impossible. But then, you know what? It's okay. They go back to the drawing board. They work a little bit hard. They turn around their dust too. They show up in London and they fucking win. So that makes them that scarier. The fact that they've already proven, they have the proof of concept that they can lose, regroup, bounce back, win again. And that, we didn't know that about them in Katowice. We thought it might just be like a fucking rocket for the sky. And then once they, calm down, they calm down. They've already proven that's not the case.
All right, I've got the angle for you then, guys. Here's the next food for thought. So there's a classic discussion that people always have in the NBA, which goes like this. The old school players all basically like chastise the young players because they don't like the fact that the young players have a lot of agency as players. And so, for example, in basketball in the modern day, even when they're in like the college and high school level, essentially all the players become friends and they all like see each other at the tournaments and they like, collaborate, and some of them even play on the same teams. And the difference is, back in the day in basketball, partly because there was no player agency, so you had to just be on the team you're on pretty much unless you get traded. Actually, the mentality back then was more like a war mentality. It was like us against them. It's like if they're on the other team, fuck them. They're the enemy. Like you never fraternize with the enemy, like unless you're like really, really good friends with them, you don't meet up with the other superstar in the off season and practice together because that's the guy you're trying to beat in the playoffs. Like fuck that guy. And so what the old school, the old heads don't like is the idea that the youngsters have sort of like killed the competitiveness of the game. The reason I bring this up is because when you say that, Maniac, I'm actually sort of with you. Like in a silly way, everyone else in CS, the number one goal should be like, don't ever allow donk and m0NESY to both get onto the same team because it is just game over then, right? So they should do everything they can. But the sad thing is that actually also makes me realize that is a flaw in the modern day, even of CS, is actually a lot of the stars are fucking pals. That's how they end up. That's how Frozen ends up in FaZe and Twist. You know what I mean? Like they sort of have the connections where eventually you can almost see that's what's like dragging them all, pushing them together or whatever. So I will say, here's the reason why also, like a true fanboy, I still do hold out that secret hope that somehow, whose music is that in the Royal Rumble? Simple, because here's the thing, mate. If you ever wanted the antidote to that problem, I have got the biggest asshole of all time on a fucking silver platter for you, bro. And I'll tell you what I love about Simple. Simple is old school like that, Maniac. Like Simple, when we all speculate, now that ZywOo rifles, in theory, Simple and ZywOo could play together. Simple wouldn't want that, bro, because he wants to beat. He actually wants. He does that. He wants to show that he's better than ZywOo. Which, by the way, it is unless he comes back and has like a fucking good team and he has 6 months off. It's obviously over for this year. But like, I fuck with that mentality though. I do like that. I like the idea that like you could be a super team and all just win all the trophies, but you actually sort of want it to be like, I'd rather let's see which one of us would win the trophies. I kind of fuck with that too, Like in a weird way, the other way around, I'd also fuck with it, by the way, if Duncan and m0NESY became enemies and they were like, actually, you know what? Fuck you, m0NESY. I'd love that too. That'll be fire too.
If you really want to get crazy about narrative, why don't we just imagine just Simple coming back to the game and realizing, you know what, the only way we're going to put this donk guy down is if I actually go and pair up with ZywOo.
Oh, wait, even worse. He's teaming up with him now. Okay, right. Okay.
That's like the next step. Like he calls ZywOo and says, listen, man, I know you and I, we haven't always seen eye to eye, but it's the moment. Like so this is
like when the Earth is under danger and, like Lex Luthor and Superman are like, listen, we can fight later, but we gotta save the world. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. ZywOo is like, okay, listen, I'm going to give up the AVP. I'm going to be a rifle. Okay. Like, I got you, bro. I'll be your sniper. Let's fucking do it. Yeah, that's what they have to do now. They have to unite. If donk and m0NESY ever play together, then we need to bring back Simple.
I can't lie. That is he's actually normally people think Maniac doesn't come with spice, Chad. He's actually made the best narrative ever there. That would be the shit. If it was like, m0NESY's joined Spirit, you'd be like, oh, fuck, game over, innit? And the next day it's just like, it's actually like a video, like a teaser, like, I was number 1 3 times. It's like, same here, brother. And then they just fucking come on, like some fucking do like that thing out of Predator. The one where like Carl Wilkinson and Arnie do that like bro thing. Yeah. Oh mate, if that major after that was pay-per-view, everyone would pay for it. I'd order it that night, mate. What are you talking about? Because I can't lie, as much as we do it like a sport, dude, some of the WWE shit is actually more fun in some ways. I actually like the big I love fucking angles like that, mate. It's the shit.
No, I think that obviously sounds like an awful lot of fun, but the reality, I think, of what you're talking about, Duncan, the problem we have is allegiances to the orgs, which I guess exists in traditional sports, especially in America, is based off where these guys are born.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas the thing that we struggle with here is, yeah, sure, we definitely have it country-based, but you're rarely playing, thanks to all these fucking international teams, with your countrymen.
That's true.
Unless it was from that perspective, I think it is hard. Like I think we will just go the way of everybody's a bit more matey, keeping their options open. You can come play with us if things don't go well over here, because they're all talking, they're all gossiping and shit, and everyone. There's a few people who are the polarizing figures, right? Like Katie, and I'm sure he doesn't have a huge amount of fans out there. And there's people who will say, yeah, I don't like this guy, right? I'll never play with this guy. There's a couple of those figures that stand out, and well, surprise, surprise, they're some of the most entertaining figures we have in Counter-Strike. Who would have fucking thought? But yeah, I think it's difficult to see it go in that angle, just because unless you're like a diehard, you grew up, you know, you're JW's son or some shit in fucking 15 years time from now or something, right? And he's a black and what is it, orange Fnatic boy, right? And then he's for Fnatic and he'll take on the rest of the world or something like that. It's hard to see. It is just, yeah, I wish they hated each other more. It'd make more interesting stories, wouldn't it?
Like, bro, this is one of those moments where I can't tell if I actually am the out of touch boomer or if it's just all you kids. You know, you're the ones out of touch, like this fucking Principal Skinner meme, right? Because, dude, it was that moment at the Stockholm Major. I've never recovered from this maniac. When at the Stockholm Major, it was the dream final. Nico versus Simple. Neither of them's ever won a major, and one of you was going to win a ring, right? In that moment, bro, Dana White's like creaming himself on a storyline like that. Like you make like a bazillion pay-per-view sales off that, you know, if you do it right. And then they have that moment where Freya is interviewing. I think it was Freya, not Banks, I'm not certain. I think it was Freya. She was interviewing them on stage right before the game with like the pre-talk. And all they had to do, Chad, was, even if they just agree backstage to make it fake, just give me a little bit of spice. And do you remember what they did? They asked Simple and Nico when you went to say to each other, and they did that thing for real, right? Before they're about to like lock horns and battle, and one person is not going to win a ring. They were just sort of like, I just hope we both play a great game. Oh, boo! Boo! Get him off the stage. I wanted like one of those old-fashioned vaudeville crooks maniac to like pull his fucking neck like that. You know that thing where you pull him off stage and get him off the fucking stage. All you had to do was give me a tiny bit of spice, and I would have been so hyped for that, you know. And also, by the way, guys, think about it. How much more horny and fucking spicy would that moment have been when Nico missed the deal if he did trash talk Simple before? Because the angle there you're supposed to say, by the way, this is where the Koreans have nailed it, where they sort of have those sessions, if you've ever seen in League, where they sort of tell them behind the scenes, like, look, you're allowed to trash talk here, like, say something spicy. They would have done something like, what you say to Simple is something like, oh, well, you know, good. I hope you have a good game, Simple. It's just a shame you won't be winning your first major this. You do one of those ones, don't you? That would have been what would have excited, but they are all just mates. Instead, the old basically were like, well, wish you well, good luck, mate. It's like, what are you talking about, you maniac? We're trying to win these games.
I know what you mean. But you know what the problem is? The problem that we have, I think, and that's not a problem, it's more like a reality of esports, is that the distance between the fans and the players is so short. It's basically just a platform called Twitter or X, and that is it. That you have such a direct sort of connection that if someone just takes the risk barely to be a little bit cagey and be a bit spicy, people will pile on him whenever he loses. You know what? It's what happened to Zontix after Katowice, where he just said, oh, you know what? I don't feel the pressure. Like, for me, it was just a normal game. I don't care. And then everyone was out there just to get him as soon as he lost, because we're intertwined. It's not a sports player who can just decide not to read the newspaper, or maybe there's a few fucking banner in the stadium. Like, we talk to each other all the time. And then we want the people to be spicy, but then when they are, then we absolutely shit on them when they lose. So if you're a player now, then you live with like this internalized fear of, oh my God, if I say something that's a little bit out of the blue, and if I lose, I'm going to have to deal with it my whole fucking life. And you know what? We did that, and none of us here, because we appreciate that. But the community did that by making sure that no player would ever be forgiven if he showed a little bit of character and then lost. Then we neutered all of them, and now nobody wants to do it. And now people just say, hey, you know what? I hope we have a good game. Have fun. That's exactly what happened. We only have ourselves to blame.
You also saw this as well when ESL released that like 40-minute donk video, right? The thing about Spirit in Katowice. And there was also, you know, Donk being warned for his shit talk being too aggressive or whatever. But you see Carrigan saying, oh, Mr. Spaghetti Arms won't let him lift the trophy. And people are like, oh, how can he say that about a 17-year-old kid? Or Donk, you know, with the translated stuff that he's saying, right? You get to see it when the competition is on, right? When the competitive fire is
it leaks out every now and then,
and that's great. Like, but the problem is as well, you see these people who in the comments like, oh, they shouldn't be saying. It's like, shut the fuck up. I can tell you've never competed at anything in your life ever before, right? Other than maybe, I don't know, you're playing tic-tac-toe with your brother or some shit. Like, what are we talking about here? Of course you're going to be saying whatever you need to say in the team speak to fire your team up, to get there. When you're a Carrigan or a Cadian or any of these leaders, you want to pull the emotion out of your players, that anything that you say in that game, they're going to believe no matter what. You're down fucking 12-6 and you have to bring that game back to go overtime. You need them believing in every single call. You need them with the fire in the belly. And yeah, occasionally there's going to be a bit of shit talk. That's half the fucking fun. Like that.
If they had the team speak from our days, it'd be over.
Bro, the best one ever, because people do forget this, because like luckily things do get memory hold that do need to be. Remember back in the day when for that ESL1 Katowice for 2015, they famously had all the voice comms, and they had like the Fnatic voice comms and TSM and Cloud9 and Envious, and famously, actually Envious very briefly got in trouble because someone took the game against Cloud9, the cash one or whatever, and then basically, I think it was like Shocks and Keo, or something like that, who were saying stuff. But basically, they were saying some like mildly out of pocket stuff. But except they weren't, because they were obviously saying it in the team speak of their game, but thinking it's private, right? And so I agree, though. If you ever saw what they were saying, like you guys don't even know. Like, yeah, but it's because they thought no one was listening. So yeah, it would be wild. And I always told people the actual real problem they had was obviously there was too many people who could translate French. The real joke back then was the team who didn't get in trouble was NAVI. And spoiler, NAVI was just saying stuff like "go and rape those whores." You know what I mean? Like they were way worse because it was in Russian. No one knew at the time. So no, mate, the comms would be wild. They got about shit talking back then. And like you're saying, in a way, you almost did it like not just to shit. You did it as a tactic too. Like you also wanted to sort of fire your guys up and like essentially like, oh, this guy's going to choke, or look like get like fuck, he was lucky there or something. You also want a bit. You have to be a little bit delusional in it as well. You know.
I like the one that it was like Twist. So it was the one where JKS was standing in, and they're in the final against G2, and Jax is playing, and it's Mirage. And Twist is like, Jax is the absolute worst A player in the world. Let's just keep going good. A, right?
That's
like,
good. Yeah.
That's like, and you know, we're all saying that shit from time to time, even when we're playing basic games. Like, oh, this fucking W swinging bot. Let's just, you know, dude, the one I wish is this. I wish, even though I don't, because obviously it'd ruin his career, but actually maybe he's the one guy who's surviving. I just wish people knew, Sponge, what Yanko's like in a green room. I've tried hinting every now and then, but like they don't know yet, like the levels. Because here's the thing about Yanko, he will absolutely like sort of like flame like some of the best players where they do fucked up shit. He is kind of like the Roy Keane of our game if people don't know. Yeah, he just doesn't let it go on broadcast as much. He keeps it a little bit less spicy, you know. Duncan, it's so good seeing Maniac and Yanko in the green room when it's like a G2 versus Vitality game, because no matter what, one of them is losing their mind.
I bet you're just half the time you're just watching their faces, aren't you? Responding to like the round wins and stuff. Yeah, I know.
I'm not even casting. I just go in early to sit in the green room to just fucking watch.
In fact, you know what? Here's the analogy, Sponge. Since obviously everyone's just watched that England game where at the end they just pulled out their arse and somehow won the match anyway. I guarantee that Maniac has done that so many times, Sponge. It's the game where, you know, ZywOo's having not that great a first half, you know, his numbers are, everyone's tweeting like cultural impact 0, you know, he's losing the game choking. And then the second, you know, he'll have those, like at the end of the game, sometimes he'll just like win 4 rounds in a row himself. I'll bet Maniac actually is like all those people where like apparently all the like Gary Neville and that who are watching the England broadcast. There's actually a video of them like celebrating when Bellingham scores like the 95th minute. I'll bet Maniac's like that. I bet he's like fucking punch in the air. La, 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 la. He's probably like Vitality. La, 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 Vitality. Does he do it, Sponge? Does he?
I'm not even hiding it, bro. It's like if people, whenever we have desks that's in the arena, and you watch the last few rounds, if you have a camera on you see me jump, you see me punch the air, jump around. Like at this point in time, I don't even hide it. I don't even hide it. I just don't give a fuck. That's just
how I have a team to go.
Yeah, it is.
I don't even have any players, so
no. He needs JKS to come back. That's when his natural bias can come to the forefront. You know.
I'm working on it, mate. I'm working on it.
It's okay. We'll get in there.
By the way, I have a question though. Here's what I want to ask though, because obviously I want to get Sponge's take here, right? I do actually think at this point the community's gone too far with Maniac Sponge. Like they're actually acting for real, like he's like the actual lawyer of ZywOo, and he has to like explain or like fucking concede if ZywOo play. Like half the fun now of ZywOo doing badly, Maniac, is just whether people can break you to admit it or not. It seems like I don't know why. Like to me, it's like he just likes it. Like he's not responsible for him failing. So I want to know with you, Sponge, where are you at on this? Because obviously people have gone to massive extremes. On the one hand, you have not Maniac. He's actually fairly reasonable. You have the KRLs of the world where their whole take is the most bizarre to me. Theirs is like, no, he's never choking. He's never choked. In fact, if you look at these stats, he's the best or something. And then they sort of almost imply like he's never had a bad game. Or that like, I think they're trying to also imply something like, that's why they're trying to compare the stats to Simple. They're trying to imply like no one's ever played better, so everyone chokes and we just over-scrutinize the odd choke, basically. Then on the other side, though, you do have people who go way too far the other way. Like, he chokes every bloody playoff game. It's like, well, obviously that can't be true either. So where are you at on this situation? Because obviously Maniac has made himself abundantly clear. So give us your take. Where are you at on this whole ZywOo thing? Because I do understand that we are in a way being harsh, because it's like actually the conversation of ZywOo and Simple in history. If you only can compare ZywOo to the greatest year of Simple, then it sounds like you're shit talking ZywOo all the time. But if you talk about ZywOo in the context of all players, you're going to be bigging him up all the time. So obviously, theoretically, the context here, SPUNJ, is ZywOo can be the best player in the game. He's challenging for that status for the rest of the year. So in light of that, where do you rationalize or resolve these occasional performances that draw this speculation? What's your thoughts?
I thank you for laying the foundations there, because I think that context is very key, right? We talk about the greats within the context of being the greats, so that's so people aren't going comparing it to just an average player. But I don't want to bail ZywOo out by any stretch of the imagination, because if he was a stud in the same way a Simple or a m0NESY was, then we're expecting more backpack performances when it's required. But there's something about watching Vitality play Counter-Strike that makes me uneasy. I don't feel that they're a complete team. And I also don't think that they feed ZywOo like the story used to be once upon a time with Alex of we flash for him. So that's why he gets all the kills.
Right.
So I don't think that ZywOo is getting the resources all the time or demanding the resources all the time that are necessary for him to be the superstar impactful player consistently, like in these massive games, right, where the team needs him the most. Because I think even though he has, and maybe it's growing, which is good, we're seeing a little bit more ZywOo ego. I think he lacks a little bit of that. Like, he lacks a little bit of grabbing the game by the balls. When he goes for the massive play and it works, he makes a statement in the server. I don't know if he's ever making that statement to the team, like demanding, like being of what they offer. So I don't know. One of the things that I've tried to do.
Oh, you know, you've just made me realise, Chad, is you're right, actually. One thing actually ZywOo has never done. You're right. He does actually sometimes just respond to critics, obviously, in the game and just win the game. But actually, that's another thing that would absolutely hype the fuck out of me. I know it's not really in ZywOo's nature, but, bro, if he ever did, like, a Carragher or a Simple-esque thing where he, like, won a game and he just stood up and he was doing some, like, you know, like, who knows? Oh, yeah, I'd get so hyped. That would all. I'd actually low key, even if it was just again fake wrestling shit, like that would actually low key spike. If he was like, bring m0NESY on us, oh, that'd be the shit, wouldn't it? Like I said to him before, essentially at the moment, he just lets Apex do that. Like I've said on this show before, mad props to Apex. I did think that was hella cute when he did that fucking shout out, like, hey, m0NESY, you're not simple, mate. Like, that is actually straight fire, by the way. Whoever wrote that fucking great line. But I do sort of almost wish ZywOo would bring that out too. That would also get me hyped, you know. If he was like, wait, talk shit now or something. If he won the MVP, that'd be amazing. If he even just did that tweet, it'd be iconic, mate.
I think it happens this happened with Heroic as well, with Cadian as the in-game leader, is the rest of the team just gets to live in the shadow of the big leader personality who handles everything, all the PR and stuff. And I think that is actually probably a negative.
Could be, yeah.
You want one or two other people to try and contribute in that fashion. I think Flamesy would be fantastic at that because we know the kid has an attitude, right?
Oh, so, sure.
And that I would love to see them use a bit more in his play style as well. But yeah, in terms of the whole thing, and I don't know, this sounds bad to say. I haven't said this in any public forum, but I've been looking less and less at statistics, right? Like, I've just been acknowledging them less. It's not that I don't think they're important. It's just that with the games that I'm casting or the demos that I'm watching or the tournaments that I'm watching, I'm trying to look at like the actual impact that I'm seeing from the way that I perceive the game, as opposed, like, because stats is something that is really easy to turn to, and they definitely have a point, and they point you in the right direction, right? But it's something that I have been trying to acknowledge less because I feel I want to be talking about the aspects of the game which help you, like the most important kill in a round, as opposed to the guy who got the most kills in the half, right?
Yes.
And with the ZywOo stuff, you definitely see these blips on the radar where he doesn't put up those superstar numbers, but I think there's other things that are contributing to the team not winning, because at the end of the day, he shouldn't be winning on his own.
No, that's true. I think that's fair.
Like, I wish he could do it more because I would love, but I think at the moment he's chasing the donk and m0NESYs of the world, and I'm hoping that his team can get their shit together, because Vitality can, with the players they have, be a really strong team. I just think they're using some of them incorrectly.
I mean, when you say he isn't demanding like some of these resources and the roles to actually sort of assert his dominance, I think you're spot on. Like, you're absolutely right, and that's his responsibility. Like, I don't think it's Vitality's fault. I don't think it's the coach's fault. It's not the leader's fault. And if I ever had such talent, which I never had in my entire life, I would consider it my job to, you know, put myself in a good position and to have these roles. Like, I always say, if you compare if you compare ZywOo to m0NESY and like the way m0NESY is being used on the CD side, then you actually have a picture of how the best player of a team is getting to do everything that is the most impactful, and he's getting to dominate all over the place all the time. But this is something that ZywOo obviously has to do. So that's one point, of course, like being a bit more assertive in what you have to do, which at this point in time, like, are we even considering it might ever happen? Because he's been playing the game for 5, going on 6 years now. He's been at the top for 6 years. It might just actually be who he is.
This is just who he is for the rest of the time, maybe.
Yeah, with the limitations that it encompasses, right? I would love for him to make it to the next level, which I think in this context would be to be the best forever and ever untouchable would be the next level. I would like him to do that. But the matter of the fact, it's been 6 years that he is behaving in a certain way, and beyond like 1-2% increments here and there, I don't really know that we're going to get anything crazy out there. But just to go back on like the Cadian or Apex taking sort of the spotlight from their teammates, in Vitality, I think it is absolutely enraging to think when you have someone like Spinks or like Flames, like what they could actually be on the conditional, like if they were to take a little bit more space and be more consistent and bring out, like, holy shit, you have some of these games from Flames and you realize how we can take over a game. That's fucking massive. That's crazy. So I would hope to see that on the stats, like the stats versus impact topic. One of the problems that I have is that I'm way too aware of like cognitive bias that we all have, and I think it's super complicated to have the right distance and to be objective to what's happening on the server. First of all, we don't get to see all the kills all the time. It's very hard, as if you're casting as well. I mean, if you're reviewing a demo, you have a bit more leeway to just go back and rewatch an action and understand why he didn't get 2 kills or whatever. I think from just a perception standpoint, it's really complicated to grasp all of that happens. So the stats will help you have a little bit of distance. But this is an idea that I've been toying with personally. Like one day I'm going to sit down and I'm going to monetize that content. Hit me up. And I'm going to watch ZywOo's demo in 1:1 speed, and I'm going to watch 10 of them, and I'm going to actually go deep in it, and I'm just not going to leave anything. I'm not going to leave anything off the table. I'm probably going to pour myself a glass of red wine, and I'm going to do it live, and I'm just fucking raw. Like,
I know he just means watch like his general game Sponge, but I've just realized he actually has backed into what would be the dream content on stream, which is Maniac with multiple bottles of wine watches all of ZywOo's worst games live without being able to fast forward.
Worst game.
Yeah, bro, if he wants to do this angle, that would be the one, right?
No, yeah.
And then what you see is you just like, you maybe even have almost like a fucking HUD from CS. You have the bottles of wine on screen, and as they get depleted as the game goes on, you know how it's going. You know, if he ends up with nothing at the end, maybe he was terrible, and he's still got some left.
There's a content idea right there.
It's not bad, actually. It's not bad.
I'm going to do it eventually. I'm going to really go down and I'm going to rewatch all of these horrible games, and I'm going to be fucking.
And you know, here's the thing, Chad. By the end, you know, he's had that much wine. He's like half the time he's speaking in French, you know, without knowing it. It's just fucking. That'd be amazing. That'd be sick. Also, it'd loosen him up like a motherfucker. Imagine how uninhibited he'd be on like the second bottle or something. Oh, that would actually be. I'd watch that content. Right? That content's fire, mate. I'd watch it.
Yeah, that'd be a content. I just have to be really careful when I pull the trigger on that. You know, let's be safe.
And also, here's the thing, Maniac. You're such a G. You're probably the kind of person who wouldn't even do a copyright strike. So actually, then everyone gets to eat because you do that. Then all of a sudden, you have Onipixel's reaction to Maniac watches you. Like, oh, Donna, what is going on, Donna? Oh my God, he is flaming him, Donna. I thought he has friends. Like, what the fuck, bro? Like, oh my driller, what are you doing, ZywOo? Like, you'd have that. You'd have fucking Flom over like, I don't know, bro. It's like, I don't even know how you do Flom's accent, whatever. Just some shit like, just some nerd shit, you know, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
we keep that idea.
By the way, I have a more serious point that I want to throw to you, Maniac, because a thing I thought was very subtle that everyone missed on the major is after the major was won, I think Pimp's moment actually is all everyone remembers. They just remember Pimp saying like, yeah, maybe Navi isn't actually top 5 and they're probably not going to win top. By the way, great point. Did age fucking very well, but they missed a way spicier one that Maniac gave actually, which I think ties into what Chad's saying, which is that whole debate began of who should the MVP be, right? And everyone, because of the stats, said, and the way the final and that third map against G2 would go, said it has to be JL, because obviously JL like saved them on the ancient game against G2, and then in the final he was just doing like otherworldly numbers, wasn't he? So everyone was like, right, it has to be JL, or maybe, I don't know, bit for the third map or something, right? But at the time, I remember Maniac saying he actually wouldn't be my MVP, and I could already tell everyone, because they worship stats, was like, what? And in fact, a lot of people were like flaming you, Maniac, and sadly, I knew exactly what you meant, which is to you, the MVP of Navi was wonderful, right? I'm going to guess, because my logic goes like this. I'm guessing it was something similar. That's all I want to throw it to you, because it's a similar conversation, I think, about the difference between stats and the eye test. The reason I could have agreed with you, Maniac, is there is no final without wonderful. Like, he got them through so much of that tournament. I do think, by the way, he was the crutch that they leaned on in the bad games and the hard times. And if you had to ask what was the most consistent piece in Navi that turned up game to game, it was him. Now, he didn't go as well at the very end of the tournament, and JL came alive. So I think I can see why, to a fan, it's obvious it was JL. But I thought I agree with Chad, actually. If you're just watching the game and you're not just worshipping the number going up and down, actually, the eye test, you could have made the case wonderful was the MVP. Like, he was kind of like the spiritual core of the team in some ways, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where, listen, the indexes and the stats that we have right now are very much helping to grab like the big picture, but they are inherently flawed in terms of they absolutely do not encompass like the context of when the kills are happening. How impactful is it? Is it game changing? Is it half changing? Is it match winning? Like, this is something that if you are really a fan of the game and you want to be truthful when you're at the desk, then you have to actually pay attention to it, and you have to be able to ponder, okay, I can see, let's just say whatever number, I can see Navi just won a map, and I can see 3 players are above 1.2 rating. But then if you've actually watched the game, there are moments where player A saved them, player B maybe racked a couple of like easy kills or just cleaned up in post-plan situations. Player C didn't really do much of that. And I personally thought that Wonderful had so many moments, which if it wasn't for him, Navi would have been done.
I agree.
And this will never, I mean, that statement is not completely true, because I think the rating does count like clutches, for example. So there are some statistical way for these clutch situations, for example, to have a number reality. I know it is a fact, but I do think these numbers, or the rating 2.0, does not capture completely the impact that a player can have at moments. And this is the work of the pundits and the casters, the analysts, and this is our job. This is our job to say to the fans, hey, listen, I know JL has these numbers, I know Wonderful has these numbers, but let me remind you, in quarterfinal, in semifinal, when the scoreline was 9-9, who won this 1v4 on Anubis? That was Wonderful. And this is where I think you have to really pay respect to the game and pay attention and paint like an honest picture. And if you just do the stats, and if you just show up at the desk and you've just basically read the stat, yeah, you're gonna miss structure in your analysis. You're gonna miss depth. You're just gonna go out and say, well, I think JL's the best player in the team. And granted, the numbers support that claim, but you've missed a whole part of the story. And that's where I think you separate as well from, like, in terms of talent and all. Like, some put in the work, the real work, and then that you can see through.
Do you guys think we should have a tournament MVP and then a grand finals MVP?
I don't like the idea. I don't like that personally.
The only reason I think, like, for example, at ESL,
I mean, he's meaning it, Maniac, in the sense of like, not like what would be ideal. I think he's meaning it in like an actual practical sense of like, it would allow fans to vote for the guy who carried the final, but you would still give like the guy, like, essentially in this scenario, JL and Wonderful could have been the MVPs, right, Chad, if you'd have done it this way?
Yeah, it's one of the things I think about, because we always have to do the DHL MVP when we do these ESL events. And for me, I hate doing it because they're making us vote right during the final.
Yes,
and
yes, exactly.
It's like, yeah. So I would like it if they just repurposed the award and they made it for the MVP of the grand final.
Of the match, like a man of the match situation. Like sports is doing it for the Euro right now. There's a man of the match after each match, and that's it.
It is the most important game of the tournament, right? To win the final, right? But overall, we know that the one that matters is the MVP accolade for the entire event, right? Yes. But I feel just like repurposing something they already have would, first of all, give that award more stock, right? Okay, yes, it is actually something, because you get it for being the best player in that grand final. Maybe only if the grand final is a best of 5, right? Because that's such a large body.
Or maybe if it's just a big event or something, like you say,
Yeah, if you could clearly be the best player across 5 maps and like be the one who makes the difference on the winning maps and stuff, then that definitely, in my mind, could.
By the way, I think there's even a very practical reason for that, Chad, which is sometimes in some tournaments, if it's a real best of 5 and it actually goes 4 or 5 maps, that might be like half your tournament's worth of play there. Yeah. So you're right, someone could just win that award only if they even shit the rest of the tournament. The reason why I don't hate the idea, Chad, is because I do think, for example, ZywOo was actually a great example. I think there are tournaments where he got MVP because he was the best player in the tournament, but he just didn't have a great final or semi-final when he lost. And you do see the fans like, why should he win the MVP? It's like, it's not for that match, is it? Like, obviously for the rest of the tournament, he was doing like 2.0 ratings, for fuck's sake. Like, he was the MVP, you know?
Yeah, actually, you know what? Why not? I think that my first reaction was, I don't want to have 2 MVPs. Like, I think we should have to distinguish very clearly. Like, there's an MVP and there's going to be like an award for like the best performing player in the grand final. And that in itself can be like a side category. It's the same way the Tour de France has like different shirts that you can have if you're like the best at sprinting, or if you're the best again. Exactly. I wouldn't mind that. Like, this would be like a very, honorary award for like a player that has a tendency to show up in grand finals. So that's great. And you could even give like depth to her career. Like, I don't know, a man that doesn't really get a whole lot of MVPs, like let's just say Electronic in the last 5 years, could maybe have here and there, like he was the man of the final, man of the grand final. And then you add that, these are accolades you can have even on your profile, and they could help us like rank the top 20. That would be like a new dimension. I just don't want it to be mashed as in we have 2 MVPs. No, there's like an MVP for the tournament and then like a man of the grand final or man of the match of the grand final. Why not? I would mess with that.
I know what you mean by that, mate. I agree. You can't make them seem like they're the same stature because one is just one match and one's the whole tournament. And obviously, if it's like the major, the tournament can be enormous. But I do agree on that point. It could actually be like another thing on your resume. Like the obvious people I'm thinking of isn't even the ZywOos and the Donks because they can win the main MVP. It's the person who has like the impact performance, like a Mega Skin Vitality or like actually Zontix. By the way, someone like Zontix could potentially nick one if they had an amazing final where they win like 10 clutches. That's the reason you win the game.
Shiro as well.
But that guy won't win the MVP of the whole tournament because he's got Donk and Shiro. I actually think it would even be a good incentive, man. I think you got one there. Like on Astralis, it would have been very interesting, right? There's plenty of times someone could have nicked like a fucking cheeky little just finals MVP only. Yeah. No, I think you got something there.
Nice.
What about, let's do Chad's take on this then. So obviously, because they made the final of the last tournament, the Blast, Navi isn't going to be changing players, mate. They're keeping the same lineup. Thoughts? Would you have made a player change? Did you think they need to? Are you a believer? Can they get back to can they win Shanghai? What do you think?
I don't think they can win Shanghai. Watch this one end up in a compilation at some point. The problem for me is that Blade interview where he was like, because they've referenced the fact that the roster is young in its development, but I'm pretty sure like Emma and Jail have been there for a year now or something like that.
It's a pretty decent amount of time.
For a while. Yeah.
Remember, EPL 18. Yeah, it must be about a year.
It has been a year. Yeah, I have the page open right now. It's been a year.
So to bring them up to speed of playing top tier Counter-Strike under the Blade system, that's where that argument I can.
Like, how many years does this fucking degree take to get? You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
Like, normally you have to be good in 3 months, guys. He's like, you're almost on your sophomore year. It's like, bloody hell, Blade. When do they graduate? Like, when does it count?
I just question, right, what would the roster changes look like if they were going to make them? What kind of pieces would they be looking to get, right? And Emma is the one that people like to turn to as the obvious one for the team. But didn't he start to perform a little bit better?
I thought so.
He's going upwards right now. It's going upwards. That is a fact.
His problem is he just has that really heavy narrative around him where like the fan who doesn't watch the games just still says he's shit every game, if you know what I mean. Like until he actually like at this point he'd probably have to be like an MVP to turn the narrative around. Because I'm with you. I think he's been slightly better and better as each tournament's gone the last few months.
So that's it, right? Because if he can continue to have an uptick in form with the type of positions that he plays, then there is more potential for the team. And we've already seen the peak, which is winning the major, right? So I suppose the idea for the team is we can return to that peak. I don't know. I just look at the roster on paper and it doesn't blow me away. But that, I guess, is how they won the major. They lost more rounds than they won, and they still won the whole event, right? They play good team Counter-Strike, and they have those impactful rounds in important moments of the game. One round that's worth 2, you know, or one that leads to a streak, or one that shuts down like a momentum play from the T side, and now they have to go back to the drawing board and default more, which makes the game easier for you. So I think... I initially said, yeah, they probably should have, but then I'm thinking, who would they have picked up, right? What player?
Like, is another you didn't make this explicit, but is another consideration that it's not a plug and play team, so it's not like FaZe, you bring in Frozen instead of. Are you implying also whoever they bring in also might need to like get into the Blade system and it'll take months and months? Do you think that would also be a problem?
Especially in Emma's position, because he's going to do a lot of talking in the mid rounds, right? With the type of positions that he plays, relaying a lot of information. And I don't know how detailed, like you said, Duncan, how many years does it take to get a degree from this fucking thing?
Who knows, right?
Yeah. So how in depth is that? But I don't know. For me, they're by HLTV, they're the 5th best team in the world. They just don't blow my socks off, right? They're not a team that excites me, other than Wonderful. I think Wonderful is fucking awesome.
Sure.
I think he's really good. But other than Wonderful, I don't get very excited about NAVI. So they're there and they play good. They play good fundamental Counter-Strike, or at least they try to.
Here's what's sad.
I don't know.
If NAVI hadn't won the major, it would actually be the other way around, because people think I hate on them because I say it was a fluke. I would be considered still an Alexi B dick sucker, because if they hadn't won the major, this team would actually be what I think they are, which is like just a dark horse where if everything comes together, they can like challenge a good team and maybe beat them. They don't do that often, but maybe beat a good team. And if you look how they play, this is why everyone gives Blade credit. They do have like a clear approach and process to the game that they iterate in the serve. They're not just calling things on the fly. They're trying to like study people, find weaknesses, apply that in the game. They don't have all the best pieces. There's actually a lot of factors I kind of fuck with. I kind of like them in some sense. But the reason why it's so easy, even though I like them, to say things that sound like extreme statements like they won't win Shanghai is because of all the teams that have sort of like fluked or been like an upset merchant. Normally you have like a superstar player who can just take over the game. They don't really have that in general. Or you have like a playing style that's super explosive and gambling. They don't have that either. So I actually think they're one of the easiest teams to say won't overperform, if you know what I mean. Like it just seems so like they're such a known quantity to me through and through. That's why I actually agree with your point, Chad. People haven't thought it through. Aside from the simple to wonderful swap, the rest of the core's been together like longer than some real lineups ever even last. Like a year's a long time for 4 players, man. That's quite a long time to be together.
I mean, one of the problems that they have as well is that I think the fundamentally good Counter-Strike they play is masking some like individual inconsistencies. Like if you really are looking through the lens, you will see like JL just had again sort of a U-shaped Q1, Q2 of the year. Like you have the major, he's MVP, he's playing incredibly well. After that, he disappears. He's even vocal about it in interviews. He's talking about how, motivation just went down the drain just a little bit. He got a little bit lost, and then he pops back up again in Copenhagen. So that's already a main sort of key piece of the puzzle that went missing. Then you have Wonderful, which I personally hold in super high regard. In Copenhagen was rather a pale version of what he can do. And Bit, you don't really know what you're going to get out of him. There's going to be a map where he blows off everybody. And then I really think Bit is like map dependent. There are maps where he absolutely destroys. There are maps where he's looking a bit more uncomfortable. And then, m0NESY starting to look better and better and go upwards. So you have some real inconsistencies, I think, individually, which is very hard. Like if you do, let's just say you ask 100 people at the very beginning of the event and you say, okay, now tell me who's going to be the highest rated player of NAVI. I think it would be hard to say. Like people would probably struggle to tell you, like, yeah, I'm sure, you know what, m0NESY is going to destroy everybody. Wonderful. Maybe Wonderful would be the answer that would come up the most because he's a bit more consistent, but it would be hard. And just on the m0NESY topic, as much as I acknowledge that he's been playing better, and I think that this is vital for Vitality, knowing his position and the autonomy and the ability to dictate and decide what's happening he's got as a secondary, right? It's such a luxury role in Counter-Strike. Like, just allow your mind to dream for a second and imagine Twist in these roles. Imagine Twist having that agency as the rifle that gets to do pretty much anything he wants in a roster like that. Sure. I mean, obviously, it's not going to happen, of course, but this is sort of the comparison that m0NESY is suffering from. Like, was he an anchor that would have that kind of output? We'd say that's fine. That's okay. You're doing more than you need. It's all good. It's all right. But because you've been put in these roles that historically have had the best players ever, you're comparing to Donk, you're comparing again to the likes of Twist, you're comparing to Nico. Like, these are the people that are sort of paved the way of the positions that you're playing. Then yeah, of course, like the comparison is hard. And I hope that he gets better and better, because I do think there's a big reservoir of players out there who would just be frothing at the mouth just to get these roles. Like, put me in, coach. Like, put me in. Like, this is, if you have the confidence, if you have the autonomy, and if you have the skill in Counter-Strike, these are the most rewarding roles you could ever play in the game. These are the most incredible. And I'll go even one step further. Why I think people like Simple and Electronic were absolutely incredible in that system is that within a pretty organized structure that is the Blade Counter-Strike, they were able to thread the needle of, we're going to play the good Counter-Strike, we're going to play the good Counter-Strike. Oh, hold on a minute. Let me just throw the plan right out the window. I'm going to do this incredible move right now because I don't give a shit what I'm supposed to do. I know this is my move. They were capable of doing both. Not every player is capable of doing that. You have people who would stick to the plan religiously because it's the safe line and it's going to get them out of trouble. But as a result, they're never going to really bail you out. And then you have players who are just fucking wild cards and can't understand that at some point you need to actually play the advantages. You need to play the numbers. You need to play the maths and play the good game. Electronic and Simple within that system were doing both. They had the best of both worlds. And there's not a lot of players who can do that.
That's a really good point. I was just going to say, I was thinking about, right, because you're saying that m0NESY is in a position, like an envious position, which I think is true. But I was trying to think of what players, like what good players, let's assume that contracts weren't a concern.
So we can just take anyone for this.
Yeah, what players would want to go to Navi in that role?
Oh,
I'm
right.
just trying to think, like, for the teams that they're already on, or, you know, like, how many players would even be going?
Yeah, but Chad, here's the problem.
Navi seems enticing.
This is a checkmate for everyone who thinks the narrative of the flukes are nonsense. When you talk about Chad, the Arena World Champions, everyone should want to play for the Arena World Champions, right? But I agree with you. Here's the problem. This is what sort of betrays, because you know there's a famous saying. It's something like actions betray something like unrevealed preferences or something. It's the idea that like what you actually do shows what you really think, not what you say. Like you could say, I like this guy. It's like, I'll give you the great example. When Simple came and attacked MOUZ and defended Nafani, my take was, okay then Simple, you go play with him. If you think he's so dope that fucking Shiro and Axel have to play with this guy forever, you play with him, motherfucker. If you want to put your money where your mouth is, show me how great he is, because it's all well and good saying for someone else to go and play with if you don't have to do it. So no, I think it's similar. Like essentially in this equation, like who would actually willingly go and say, I want to be in Navi and have that spot? Because I'm with you, Chad. In theory, if they're the champions of the major, it should be almost everyone, right? But I think almost everyone you could go through, even on lesser teams. Like the joke is, yeah, Twists plays for Team Liquid, but would even he do it? By the way, Elish plays for Complexity. Would he actually go to Navi? I think it's even touch and go on that one. Obviously, people like Frozen, in theory, should go to Navi. Mate, I'm pretty sure he's just going to stay in phase, isn't he? You know what I mean? I agree with you, Maniac. It's pretty good food for thought. If people are taking because they won the majors, we don't have to change anything. Yeah, but if you could upgrade him to these players, wouldn't you immediately be like a favourite for the next event? It'd be pretty fire, right?
Yeah, you're right. But that's the problem of Navi, is that the profiles that we would think immediately would be a direct upgrade might actually not want to do that.
Could well be, yeah.
I mean, personally, I do think like Twist and Elish, even though it's a little bit out of pocket, I think these would be candidates.
Yeah.
Because it's not like things are going great where they're at, and it's like they also themselves are going through turmoils and of some sort. So I think they would be candidates. Yes. But of course, if you're Frozen, if you're Sphinx, if you're Donk, like why the hell would you even play with the idea? Now, okay, hold on.
Come on.
Food for thought, open to the group. If m0NESY leaves G2, should Nico consider going to Navi?
No one's even thought about that, to be fair. It's not like it couldn't happen, right?
Hey, listen, if m0NESY goes on his own way and he actually lives, if you're Nico, do you consider the idea?
Oh,
because here's the problem, Chad. The reason why I can't lie, that's actually low-key fire, is because, one, I actually do think immediately Nico could do all the things him is supposed to do and better. And then secondly, they said they wanted him to be a secondary caller. Bro, I think we've got like a fucking. I think it's working for everyone, isn't it? Isn't this going to work for everyone? The only downside, of course, is he has to work with Lexi B again. But I don't think he actually had a problem with that personally. By the way, like I think that shit was more like the ambience of the team, or they had Jax. I think people have overrated. I don't think he hates him like he disliked Carrigan or something like that. You know, I don't feel like that would be a stumbling block. It's a spicy move. What do you think, Chad? What if this move happened?
I know Wonderful's not quite on the m0NESY level, but he's still pretty fucking good. So
he is.
You know, and they will play better team Counter-Strike over there.
And he'd have Bit as an anchor. You'd have Bit as an anchor.
Yeah, it's look, if that was his only option, then yeah, I could, that's not a terrible move whatsoever. Imagine Nico in a Navi.
I know. That would be so great.
That would also be one of the weird. You'd think it was a Photoshop, wouldn't you? I know. I can't handle that image, mate.
You do the concept of like the Stockholm Major final where he misses on Simple and then he just puts on the jersey.
Yeah.
That's exactly. If you can beat them, join them. Put on the fucking jersey.
Far out.
By the way, also, they wouldn't dare do that, especially against Nico. But low-key, that would also be the most based fucking, like, introduction video from Navi. Like, if you can't beat them, join them. And it's just Nico joining after whiffing the deal. That would actually be glorious. I just don't know if you want to piss off your star player when you're just signing him like that.
No. Probably not.
Right, here's the thing. In all this conversation, this State of the Union of the top teams, top players, right, we have to do the conversation that we have to do right now because we're going to find the answer out in the next few months, boys. So, obviously, if you're actually a real fan of CS, you're someone like us who watches all the matches and gets really into it, the real team that's mega exciting is obviously MOUZ, because MOUZ actually has all the pieces to actually, like, upset this whole conversation. They can come in, by the way, and go, we don't care about having the number one player, we can win anyway. You know what? In fact, all you other teams out there, every other team's complain about flaws, you know, spirit, inexperience, vitality. Do they have the good players, but do they have a system? Oh, FaZe, can they win anymore? Do they have a start? MOUZ actually doesn't seem to care about any of that, boys. They just come in. They actually, the most underrated thing about MOUZ, I keep telling people this is, stop looking at the fact they didn't win studio, anything except the studio land. Here's what you look at about MOUZ. Look how many losses they have this year, and look who they're against. Like, this is actually one of the hardest teams in the whole world to beat. Like this is like, I think people actually, it's funny because the obvious context of criticism is they haven't yet won the big stadium event. That's a totally valid one. That's why I say we're going to find out soon if they can be the real number one. But I think it's obviously a very exciting one because here's the difference, Chad. I feel like because it's the MOUZ org, people want to cast them as underdogs, right? It's like the idea that because they're an experienced, so people are trying to make this team like at the end of CSGO, what we did with teams like Heroic and ENCE, right? Where it's like, oh, you know, they're like plucky underdogs and they're up. Dude, I don't even think that's right. Certainly you can do the will they choke online angle. Dude, this team is stacked. It's full of like fucking, like they're not like the best player, but like aggregate, like pretty sure, here's a statement for you. If you go aggregate players, MOUZ might be the best roster in the world. Like I think this roster's fucking unbelievable. Like every player's pretty good at his role. The stats are really good. As I say, they rarely ever lose to anyone except the absolute best teams in the world. Like if you want CS to get even more spicy, this is the one this is the fucking jalapeno you throw into the pot, as it were. Like this could make everything spicy. If they can do this for real in stadiums, game on, mate.
But that's the thing. This team, with back-to-back best-of-5 finals, regardless that it was studios, they dumpstered, right? They
the best teams in the world, rinsing them, yeah.
Yeah, and the way that they do it, right? Because they have that confidence about their play style, but they are considered, right? Like you talk to somebody like Exertion about Counter-Strike, he's well above his years in the way that
he's really smart
about the game than you know what you'd expect.
Yes.
And I think that's probably the same for a couple of the players in that team. And then when things had settled and you could see that SPUNJ wasn't having to, you know, necessarily have to micromanage each round, right? He was at that point, the system's there, everybody understands they've been together for a long enough period of time with the Brolin edition. He was even able to contribute massively in the fragging department. So I think that there's a lot of exciting prospects in terms of that you're talking about the talent in the team and their output, right? But there's two hurdles, and maybe the hurdles are combined hurdles. Because for me, the caveat for this team to unlock them is, first of all, getting out of the shadow of their big brother FaZe. Because every time they go up against FaZe, right, FaZe have their number. FaZe have their number. And if they could get the double whammy of drawing FaZe in a quarterfinal game, in a big tournament, on a big stage, and beat them, it doesn't matter if it's gritty, it doesn't matter if it's overtime, it doesn't matter if they just get there, but for that mental unlock, I think that's twofold. I think that's, okay, now we can fuck FaZe. Like, we can already beat everybody else, but now we can beat FaZe, and we did it on a stage. We took on our biggest enemy or our biggest choking point, and we took them down in this environment. I think that's the unlock for them. But whether or not it's going to happen, I don't know. Their biggest positive is also one of their biggest weaknesses, is just how young they are. Their most experienced player, again, is another kid. Like, it was Frozen before. Now it's Brolin. And he played with, obviously, legendary Fnatic team, right? But that was Krieg meta of Counter-Strike. Like, that's how far back we have to go there. The only thing which doesn't get a lot of airtime is this ZipX edition as the assistant coach. And who in the Astralis team, when they came together, it most likely was a combination of all the different elements coming together to make them so good, right? But there has to be like a spark, or there has to be something that you can identify there. And if he can bring whatever that was to them, that could be the thing that unlocks MOUZ. I love watching them play because they play really in-your-face CS. Like, it's great. They play some good momentum-based Counter-Strike, but I'm still just like, for me, the jury's out. Like, I can't say one. If I have to, right, I would say probably not. I think they're still going to struggle with the stage hurdle. And again, like I was talking about before, you know, the bracket could be an absolute cruel mistress to them, because we know FaZe, especially if we keep up these fucking 6-team playoffs. FaZe don't give a fuck in the group. As long as they get through, they're like, yeah, we're good. Whereas MOUZ, I spoke to Torji the other day, he's like, yeah, we think we need to win every game, and going further because of the group is better.
That makes a lot more sense if you look how they perform, Yeah,
I was like, I wish everybody had your mentality, Torji, but unfortunately they don't, bud. So you will have to take on FaZe sometimes. So yeah, I'll just keep using. I don't know. I'll say no. I think they're still going to struggle in the big matches. I think they still have some learnings to do.
I think one of the issues that they have, because I was doing this mental comparison, and I realized they actually have a lot of similarities to Spirit. As in, they have a wide roster from coast to coast with very strong players. They have strategically a very, very good approach to Counter-Strike. They have good executions as well. They rely on a whole lot of players to perform, which is all of the attributes that Spirit have. The issue that they have is that they do not have a phenomenon. They don't have a player that is just head and shoulders above the rest, and that is going to give them that extra 10, 15, 20, 25% of rounds in like key moments. So as a result, you're looking for incremental changes. You're looking for maturity out of all of the players. You're looking to get like the extra 1%, 2%, 3% out of all the players. And I feel like from just like a coaching standpoint or from an IGL standpoint, it's a little bit harder to work on because it's not like you have like one problem identified and you say, okay, you know what? If I can solve this issue, oh my God, we're about to mess everybody up. No, you actually have to keep doing what it is you're doing, and you have to identify like key sort of threshold moments where you kind of falter a little bit, and you have to work on that. And it's almost like a catch-22, because unless you are psychologically so capable and so focused, how will you recreate the conditions of a high-pressure semi-final game where details go bad when you're actually just playing? Like it's an incredibly hard exercise of the mind to do that. And this is why I think for MOUZ, we usually say, you know, they need some time, and it's kind of a lame, bland excuse. I think in that specific case, it is a case of reps, games, again, stages, again, learn from it. G2 in Chengdu, nobody thought they would beat G2 in Chengdu. We thought, oh, well, that's it. They're playing against the big boys. They're going up against the people who own the stage. They're back to get slapped. They beat G2. That's one little Tetris box. That's one little thing that they can build on. And of course, they lose the phase and everybody just drops the conversation immediately. But for them, I think that's what it is. It's about testing themselves time and time again in these high-pressure situations so that they can finally get that inner feeling that, hey, you know what? Actually, whatever we're doing up until that point, we can do it again. Like, we don't have to overcompensate. We don't have to overcomplicate. We don't have to get extra nervous. We can do that. I don't know how they can practice it. Like it's like I said, it's almost like a catch-22.
No, you have to sort of learn on the fly on that one. I agree. You just have to be in the situation and come through. It's why if you ever look, it pretty much is that you have to get in. In my opinion, when you choke, like as you're saying, Maniac, half the problem is early on. You do, am I choking? Was it just a bad game? Was this guy uncomfortable? You know, was I off that day? Did I not eat breakfast at the right time? There's a million factors you can distract yourself with. And then later on, as you're saying, it's like, how do you recreate that scenario? You can't. In fact, I think most of the times in history, the people who are like the serial chokers who came second a billion times, I always say the real cruel thing is, if you ever go back and track how they choked, usually early on, 2 or 3 times in, there's a really close match where you just feel like if they just won that one, it doesn't become a whole thing in their mind. It doesn't become like a ghost just appearing over and over again when they're in that moment. In fact, I think the best example is how Carrigan 180'd that career narrative, because once he started to win with like the modern phase and win all those super close clutch games, it became the opposite. Now actually every time you see him in that situation, you think he's going to come alive and fucking blow him away and win the big match. So I do think you can reverse it. No, the thing for me is, this is why I brought them up and said, like, to me, if you're an analyst and a real hardcore fan of the game, this is the most interesting sort of like addition to the mix of top teams we have, because it's the classic one that makes Counter-Strike the team game so beautiful and an art, right? Which is, Counter-Strike isn't the game where the best player wins every time. It's why actually, if you're an outside fan, you might even wonder, why do we always say like it's so obvious m0NESY's the best player when he's won one tournament and that was with some like weirdo standing thing? Because what we're pointing out is like, actually he is doing so much, but the rest of his team isn't there, right? So the thing about MOUZ I think is fascinating is they don't have even one player who's a candidate for best player in the world. In fact, I mean, who would you even pick? Is it Exertion? Would people say him?
I think Exertion is probably a top 5 or 6 contender for this half of the year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But even then, it's firmly in sort of like a 5, 6. He's not going to be like, no one's put him next to. But this way, he plays almost the same role as Duncan. No one's even compared the two players. That tells you a little something right there. It's not a competition between who's the best. Everyone knows it'd be Donk, right? So the thing I would say is this, though. It is a classic archetypal battle, though. Let's watch the teams with the godlike superstar players play against a team that's well-rounded and has all the pieces. Because I do think if you're going to have, like, you didn't tick the top box of have the best player in the world, they have everything else except for the experience angle. You know, like the rest of the roles are fabulously filled out. Like, if you ever wanted to do it by committee, this is the team that could do it. Like, you look at how strong the pieces are. I mean, the joke on this team of the Brawler angle is they didn't even actually need him to be relevant, but when they get him, now they're a contender. Like, it's not it, because there's another thing. If it was just that Brawler was sick, that'd be the story. It'd be like, well, like, you know, he's like the new Frozen. No one even compares him to the guy he replaced. He just has to be pretty good, and then suddenly like, they've just got enough to almost beat everyone, or if it's off stage, beat everyone every time, it seems like. So it's certainly spicy. It's interesting.
That was one of the things Torji was saying when I spoke to him the other day, was with the removal of Frozen, it felt like other members of the team had to step up, but it also gave players more room as well in certain positions or roles. Because the type of player Frozen was, he's going to win you the clutch, but he's also going to do some things which are more like selfish, right? Like it benefits the team at the end of the day. But where Brolin coming in, Brolin, like Fnatic, Fnatic never had a get right. Right? They never had a get right in that same type of mega hard lurk, even on edging on baiting sometimes. They were always, like, everybody felt like they would always do a bit of everything.
Sure.
Right? Obviously, Crim's a bit more anchory and stuff, but it's a bit more gritty. And I think Brolin kind of came into Counter-Strike that way with that Fnatic roster, and he's still plays that way in MOUZ, where he'll sacrifice if he needs to sacrifice. Like, he's not a one-for-one replacement to the type of player Frozen is. And what it's done is it's in certain positions across the map, it's given players, more room or more options. And I think that's why you get to see them look quite cohesive now. Like that's one of the things. The team doesn't feel, I don't think they were disjointed with Frozen, but they definitely look a lot more, like everything clicks a lot faster with this roster, at least to me it does. And I like watching them play. I just don't know the progression, how long it's going to take, because they're going up against other rosters who have, well, Navi doesn't, but there are other rosters. Well, but they know what they know what it feels like to win on the bigger stages. So I guess that's some of their issues. Is you're right, Mathieu. How do they get these reps in, and how many heartbreaking losses, or not even heartbreaking? How many just dumpster losses can you take before the image inside the team gets shattered? Right. That's one of the turning points as well. And then people start pointing fingers. Well, who's the guy not performing, or do we not trust his calls? And that's where all of that starts to grow. So how much of that can MOUZ withstand?
I'll give you a factor as well. I even think that the chalking narrative could get worse, and here's why. Because everyone compares them, because the most recent chalking team was the famous Acadians Heroic, right? We all knew, again, by the way, similarities. They used to ace every group stage. They were always going to be in the playoffs. They could pretty much only lose to the absolute best teams. And they used to also not have the best players. They would play off like having a committee of players and a great in-game leader and stuff. But the difference is, even when Cadian's team would win like a blast, it would be by the finest margin error, right? Ever, rather. So I actually think the other scary thing if you're MOUZ is this. Imagine if you go to Cologne, and listen, I don't actually think this team can fully bomb. Let's say you just come 5th to 6th, right? You make the playoffs, but you lose, I don't know, you lose to Spirit or something. You get drawn against them, you lose to them in the round of 6 or whatever, even though I picked a bad team there, because actually the one team MOUZ just consistently beats. But whatever, I'm pointing out that like a bigger team beats you, right? The worst thing that could ever happen is then you go to the next small tournament and rinse it completely. Because that's what I do worry about with MOUZ, is like you say, guys, they're 3-0ing these best of 5s. Like, then if you just win close and then you fail at the big stage tournament, you can just go, it's still our progression. In fact, you can even argue, stop putting the pressure on us. We're not number 1 yet. We're number 3 or something. If you can go, and when there isn't pressure, you can 3-0 the best teams in Counter-Strike, then on paper, you are the best team. The question is, can that ever actually show up in a Lanxess, in the whatever stadium in Shanghai you're going to be in? Because at this point, like, I always thought with Heroic, we went too far with the fact that because they choked, we like expected them to win all the events. I didn't really expect. I just thought they should win the odd one. You know what I mean? Like I thought they should have won IM Rio, for example. Like there's an example of one where you should have probably picked that one up. But I don't blame you for everyone. And the problem with MOUZ is the more impressive they are to me when there isn't pressure, I am going to start to demand like you. It's like the ZywOo thing. If you could be that good except in that match, why not in that match? Why not win the whole thing? Like in a low key way, I think we should put pressure on them. I know people take them that they're young, but I think they are good enough to win. I don't know what stops them, but they are good enough in theory.
I'm right there with you. What I do think they have compared to the rest of the field in Counter-Strike, and I don't pretend like I know all of the inner workings of all the top teams.
Oh, sure.
But it does feel like they have probably the healthiest sort of ecosystem as a team, like the way they are with each other and within the ranks. And I do think that this is going to help you process these losses and like trying to get the most out of it while being healthy, trying to avoid like the resentment and trying to just avoid like just blaming teammates. And I think they are pretty equipped to deal with that. And I agree with Chad as well, and I agree with your point. I think the danger is when doubt actually starts creeping in that this is ever going to happen. Like the day that one of these players starts actually wondering, hey, are we ever going to win? Like, because right now, when you are at the beginning of this incredible journey and you lose a couple of events, it's all right. Like, I think your faith in the project and your faith in the group is still relatively strong or intact. And you say, you know what, we're going to get there eventually, guys. It's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. We got these nice wins. Remember what happened in Pro League? Like, we're going to be fine. That eventually, just like water against rocks, is like kind of erode just a little bit. You lose another tournament. You lose another tournament. You have another disappointment. And then you start wondering. And then when that happens, and they hear like the calls of the siren of the rest of Counter-Strike, and people trying to go and poach a guy like HooXi, trying to find like a playmaker like Zerjan. Like you're saying, hey, email. We didn't even put Zerjan in that conversation. Like, hey, you know what, Zerjan, you want to play the NAVI, brother? Like, I'm gonna give you all. This is the most dangerous territory MOUZ could ever find themselves in. The day they themselves start doubting about
Chad,
their ability to win.
If you think about that, just imagine, like he said, just imagine Pop Exertion in Imma's role.
Yeah.
That's an interesting move, right?
But right now, why would he?
Well, yeah, right.
Because of the major champions, it wasn't a fluke. Stop hating, Maniac, stop hating.
But you give that point.
No, I think it's a banger move if you would do it. Yeah, of course. I also think, by the way, that's actually a very valid point you make there, which is probably the last thing we need to mention in that sense, is people also are just assuming this project gets to survive for years with the same lineup. I think you're right, Maniac. The real danger if you're MOUZ the org is, bro, if this team doesn't win, doesn't everyone just pick it apart? Like, almost all these players would go elsewhere. By the way, spoiler, Broland, there's all those Swedish teams that want him tomorrow. Fucking Yimpat
to Vitality.
I'm pretty sure G2 and Vitality... G2 and Vitality's owners should fight to the death in a steel cage to see who gets assigned Yimpa. Exertion, as we're talking, could walk into about 5 teams tomorrow and win everything. Like, wouldn't everyone get picked? He could be in like a fucking whatever, a Liquid or something. Like, there's loads of teams could have these players. Like, they'd be very eligible players. Pretty much every one of them could go. By the way, as much as people might downplay Torji, there's lots of fucking teams could use an AWP like that, mate. Yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
I think that's one of the things with if G2 and Liquid both go down the routes of having NiKo and Twist in-game lead, you know that at one point you're going to be able to get your hands on a Kixon or a HooXi, right? Like, Heroic and MOUZ aren't going to be able to protect him forever, right? So, until another good in-game leader kind of pops up his head, that's why I think them taking the risks, having Twists, and the NiKo one, I don't know. That's just my
thing is, though, it's like you said, Chad, if they did it like that, though, if they did it like, look, but if we ever get the chance to get like the better guy, I'll step aside. I wouldn't necessarily hate that angle, you know what I mean? Normally, I don't like the idea you do in-game leading like as a tourist, but if you're going to do it more like I'll do it properly. I'll try like if I'm Twist or whatever. But if it doesn't work out, then let's get HooXi. If that's kind of like the take, I think that's not a bad compromise, though. You know, have a few months of doing it.
It doesn't surprise me if Liquid don't have a lot of money to spend right now after the Skulls and Cadian.
Right? Well, here's the thing.
To be reasonable here. We're not trying to be responsible with our money. Okay.
All I'll say is this, without saying too much, I've just basically heard that angle actually is a non-starter. Because I've heard basically it's implied that like actually, let me think how you phrase this. Right, put it this way, the detail I think people don't know about the Skulls deal is, as far as I know, people have done that thing where, you know, in sports, sometimes someone will sign a huge contract, but if you ever read the minutiae, it's like, yeah, but that includes all the bonuses and activations, you know, like what happens if you... As far as I've heard, some of that was that. It wasn't just a pure, like, here's 600k in a bag, and then they just have 600k. As far as I think it might not even have been 600k, essentially, and then also, I think it was implied to me that whatever deal they're doing with Furia, they might even have got most of it back, mate. So that might not even be the end of the world. But with that said, I also agree, though, think of the players they played elsewhere, like fucking all those massive names. I don't know if they're going to spend like mega bucks for a... Because we're assuming if you want kicks in a HooXi, you are going to get charged through the nose. Like, these orgs know these are the players to keep, yeah. So it's definitely a big gamble to do.
I don't know. Like, Liquid are in a really interesting... The biggest piece for them is an AWPer, right? If you were going to spend, that's what you're spending for. And like NIP said, Wrinkle ain't going anywhere. So I don't know who else should be trying to get...
By the way, what has gone on in CS when like the major winners can't get anyone? Wrinkle won't leave NIP to join team. What's going on here? You know what I mean? Like, these moves, back in the day, these were a slam dunk. If anyone asks you, you're over. The joke is you're just changing them on IRC. You're in the team already. It's like, oh, Liquid, whatever. You're like 1G. The guy, everyone wakes up like, where the fuck's Wrinkle for the practice? Like, that would be like 20 years ago, guys.
I can't live in a world where NAF and Twist aren't winning. Like, I just can't live in that world. It just doesn't sit well with me. I get uncomfortable thinking about it. Like, NAF is such an incredibly underrated anchor. Holy shit, Twist is such a playmaker. Like, surely we have to make something happen. And by we, I have no agency in that.
Sure.
But like, please, can that happen? Like, at some point, I was ready to ship them away. If they're gonna stay in Liquid and just have the reins of what's happening, like, come on, man. Like, give them a roster that can compete. Let's see.
By the way, I'll shade this in just to tease people if they're a Liquid fan. Obviously, people know part of the reason why Twist was in phases. He also has a girlfriend from Germany. He had no problem living in Europe. Guys, I don't know if you saw your social media, but the other day, NAF proposed to his girlfriend, who's German, who lives in the Netherlands. Spoiler, That's okay if you're in Team Liquid. You go to the Netherlands all the time, mate. Tell you what, that means it's on the table. He might go to fucking Europe in the future. Why wouldn't he? Right? That'd be totally plausible. He could be in a whatever team. By the way, he could obviously be in a FaZe Clan a year or two down the line. And there's another one I've got to say, Maniac. If Liquid doesn't work out, I actually want finally people to have like a fucking everyone come for NAF. Like, why can't Vitality have NAF or G2?
Yes. Oh, bro,
these would also be great moves, right? Everyone would want that. And I also think maybe, I don't know if fans know this, but as a player behind the scenes, he is held in very high regard. He's one of those guys that on like the level of like a Rain type person, well, loads of pros respect him more than fans do. Like they all think this guy's the shit. I've never heard anyone actually say they didn't think NAF was good, mate. He was a pro player.
Oh my God. Listen, you have no idea how many times I've toyed with the idea of just basically putting Apex in a chair and doing like a fucking Orange Clockwork sort of intervention on him to make him an anchor and have NAF and Twist come in.
Okay.
NAF and Twist come in and have NAF as the second anchor. Have Twist, like Twist, fakes his rifle. Have ZywOo in there. Like, come on, like surely.
I'm just trying to figure out how this process works. So when you sit Apex down and you force him to watch, I'm assuming the premise is everything he's watching is when on CT side he does like, like a window push or Mirage or some bizarre.
Exactly. So
and you're like, what are you doing? And you're just like, what, cutting that with like scenes of people getting their throats slit and stuff. So it just traumatized him. And then eventually he's become like the most passive anchor of all time. Like, he's like, he's like Inters at the beginning of Gambit, it's just like permanently holding a corner.
Exactly.
Like. I like the way Maniac doesn't just go, I'd replace the role. He goes, I'd sit Maniac Apex down and brainwash him. Listen, if you get that would be that would be the greatest psychological operation ever to get Apex to become like an anchor, though, wouldn't it? Like,
yeah, listen, maybe it's the way. Maybe we got to think outside the box.
You're better off hitting up Elon Musk and getting the Neuralink installed.
Right.
You controlling it while you're fucking watching in the green room or some shit. There's no way Dan's sitting still, mate. That guy.
He tried, and that didn't work out.
Oh, by the way, you do know the worst thing about all that stupid tech is that they've already had a news story that was like that. Like, hey, it makes it almost like an aimbot in games when you have it. So you ready, Chad? Now you're going to have to hear everyone like, there's a bloody Neuralink in every other game in Premier. Then Richard Lewis like, there's not as many Neuralink in the world as you're all making out. And like, he doesn't even have a Neuralink. He doesn't know what he's talking about. It's like, no, I can't take this. Get me out. Get me the fuck out, please. Meanwhile, in the same game, right, I'm trying to just sit down and have like sports conversations. Everyone's like, well, does Zontic intentionally shoot them in the dick or not? Like, what? I can't. Please, guys, please. No, Donk isn't even doing anything. I press crouch too. Like, what even are these conversations? What I don't get is, in a mad way, we've gone all the way back to the beginning of CS that you guys remember. When back in the day, it was all just like, please tell me your sensitivity value. And then even though we all had different mics, we're just putting in like fucking heat and sensitivity, like 1.28, sick, I will win now. Like, we've gone full circle. We're right back to there. Everyone's got secret tech, apparently. Like, what is it? Do you slide, Chad? Do you shoot them in the dick when they come? Like, I don't fucking know anymore. I thought you just play CS and pop heads, you know what I mean? I'm like old school scream. I thought we just populate heads. Isn't that all we're doing?
Fucking hell. It's getting crazy these days, isn't it? It's fucking wild out there. But I'm loving it. There's so much conversation.
Oh, there is.
The best thing at the moment is watching the community lose their mind. Like, CS2 fucking sucks. That's my favorite one at the moment. And then that'll disappear for a couple weeks and it'll come back in a couple weeks' time. It's like, I don't know, man. I'm playing it every day. I'm having a good time. So that's.
Oh, actually, I've got one last sort of topic we can do. One, I will just say, I do think it is mad that there are all those like really weird takes like that. Like, but actually, I do have one last take we can do. I should have tied this in earlier on the NAVI thing. Dude, the weirdest angle, like you referenced, is that thing where it'd be one thing if JL was just like, hey, as a team, we haven't played as well. It's not our level. We could be better. I don't know why he's done this framing, though. Well, as you say, dude, he talks like he is Nico and he finally won his major and now he's lost all his motivation. Like, bro, that's the only thing you've ever won. What are you talking about? You basically played really well for like a day and a half. Like, what the fuck are you? If your hunger has sated after that, a tournament that essentially you fluked, you're just not going to make it, mate. Like, this game isn't for you. Like, you are going to be some guy who's back in a fucking Apex type team. Like, in that scenario, this is why we've got to stop this ring culture thing, right? The reason ring culture doesn't make sense is Nico's career as a rifler is a million miles above the level of JL's career, even though JL indeed has not only won a major, but was the MVP. Like, people make it so that winning the major is the end line of the race. Only if you've also done everything else. You've got to have the body of work. Like, you've got to have all the, what about, by the way, here's the obvious thing he hasn't. Where's all the other trophies? How are you not motivated, mate? If anything, shouldn't it be the other way around? If anything, NAVI, no one knew if they could win a tournament with that lineup. You've won the World Championship. Now it's like the other way, right? Now it's like, hey, foot to the floor, guys. Let's win some more tournaments. Let's win Chengdu. And let's, in fact, before all the other teams get their shit together, let's rack up some trophies. Let's take our time as the best. What a weird angle that that is. I just don't get. I don't know if it's just that he was just, you know, any idle thought came out and he just thought that as an answer. But it's just a strange angle to me because I don't really get that. Like, to me, he's very young in his career.
For me, I just think it's the dopamine dump, right? Like in the sense of we won the thing that is considered the top of the mountain.
In his case, more like the dope in me dump, where he just says all the shit in his brain. Whatever, keep going. Wasn't the best line. Keep going, Chad. Rest of me, come on.
I just think it's one of these things where, you know, he's having and you're right, like in the sense that this should be the beginning, right? But you know, you go into these other tournaments and it doesn't compare mentally to a major, and obviously being like a younger player, not being able to get yourself there. I was going to be a bit more sleazy with it and compare it to like banging a 10, and then you're going out on dates with like 5s and you can't get it up, but it's not really the same.
Whoa, I know.
What's happening now?
I know. Fucking hell.
But yeah, I just, that's what I chalk it up to, because I think you're bang on. You're at the start of your career. You only came onto our screens as a player we were acknowledging because of the run that you had back at the Blast Major, right? And even there, it wasn't because of you individually.
No.
It was sorry.
No, it's like people like Nork and stuff like that. Yeah.
Apex. But like he was favored by Cuban early, even back in the Mad Lions days. Where we're going, but he's only been on our screens as a player we're considering in the upper echelons of Counter-Strike in very recent history. So that's why it. You know, if you sat the guy down and you had a reasonable conversation, I'm sure he would probably be like, "Yeah, of course I'm hungry. I want to win all the things." But I just think the other events not living up to the expectation of winning the major, which is the top of the mountain, right? Like he's climbed Everest as his first mountain. It's like, well, that kind of spoils all the other fucking mountains, doesn't it?
Yeah. Fuck it. I'm just gonna get psychological for a bit. I'm gonna talk out of my ass. That's my best moment. Disclaimer: the Maniac bullshit. There we go. The disclaimer is out. There's one thing about winning such a tournament with that team and the danger of having a little voice in you that tells you that might have been a fluke. Like, just be careful. Like, if this is now the new standard that you're setting, there's a whole lot of different ways you can be disappointed down the line. But this is something that he only could actually make a statement about. Like, they themselves looked shocked about the level that they were capable of putting forward. Like, even Blaze said, holy shit, like I don't know where this came from. Like, we were working, of course, we had our expectations, we thought semifinals should be our objective, and then we blow everybody out the water. Oh my god, that's it. How do you deal with that reality now if there is still a side of you that thinks, are we capable of doing that on the long run? Like, maybe, just maybe, the most protective way you can sort of shelter your ego is just to detach from it and say, you know what, that's it, it's cool. Let me just relax just a little bit. And then I'm going to go right back up on the horse and get to the grind again. Because if now this had become the new standard for you, you're setting yourself up for a whole lot of disappointment and anger and frustration, which, as a champion of Counter-Strike, is going also to be part of your daily life. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to lose events. You're going to be pissed. Maybe some people don't want to have to deal with that too quickly. So you know what? Let me just dissociate from this. Just won the major. I'm an MVP. Fuck that. And then right back on the horse. So that it could be something. It could be something. Again, disclaimer, bullshit, psychology out there. But, you know, the way we deal with these kind of victories is not always as straightforward as it seems from the outside.
By the way, when they did win that major and Blade had that, like, just really, like, genuine smile, like, he was just, like, almost laughing. Part of me, low-key, did think he was almost laughing, like, holy shit, how have we just won this fucking match like this? This is ridiculous. I mean, remember, even, like, Bit was going crazy. And I'll just throw this out there. One thing I actually do think is, even though everyone knows this already, it is just one of the greatest, like, it's almost like Blade did sit down and try and construct a character, even though I know he didn't. He is just who he appears, by the way, guys. He's not actually putting on any false airs or anything, but I just love the fact that ridiculous detail where the only pictures he uploads to Instagram is him holding a trophy, but he has like 8 fucking pictures now or something because he's just won like 2 majors. That's actually gangster as fuck. Like, I can't even lie. That makes me like buy in even harder to the fucking narrative. Like, I want so badly for him to just be the greatest genius Counter-Strike ever saw, you know. I low-key do.
Oh, he's out there in the race, huh? That's definite.
Either way, I'll even say as well, Chad, that's one thing people don't give fucking Blade credit for. You know, when everyone talks about, oh, there's this like new school of Counter-Strike and a new way to play the game, this guy is by definition like the oldest fucker in the scene who's been like actively in the scene. So if anything, he should get insane credit for like updating his game, evolve it. Think about it. This is a guy who was like IGLing in like 2004, something mental. He's like a coach now 20 years later. It seems the world champions. Like, that is incredibly impressive to me. I think that's insane, mate.
He went from, in early CSGO, being the guy whose teams were known for having really quite intricate executes, right? To now being a guy who coaches system-based teams and got to work with one of the greatest Counter-Strike players to ever touch the game. and coach him to a major victory, right? And doing that while not just running like gimmicks, like running actual comprehensive Counter-Strike. Like you think of the evolution of the way, like what he did in Flipside was, well, I have these pieces which aren't very good. How can I call us into winning positions? And now it's how can we come up with a way that these players can play themselves into winning positions, and we all understand and believe the same system that we're playing, which I think is fucking great. Like, and he's a funny guy too.
Right? Oh, he
like,
is, yeah.
Think it, but he's a funny guy to talk to. He's pretty funny, Blade.
I even think, by the way, probably an underrated quality now you were saying all that, when I was thinking about it was, bearing in mind, obviously, he had Simple for so much of Navi and Simple and Electronic. Bro, considering when they lost SPUNJ and they were still like, people forget, they weren't winning anymore, but they used to come like top 4 quite often. They were still like a relevant team. And then obviously now, he didn't even have Simple and he won a major. Bro, as a coach, he's actually got to be one of the greatest floor raiser coaches of all time. Like, you can basically give this guy almost any pieces, it seems like, and they'll be like a playoff team, it feels like.
Yeah, and I'm glad we're getting to talk to him a little bit more, because we get to see, like, understand how he works, and we get to feel like his work ethic and his determination, because to me he's like the embodiment of real work is silent. Like, you don't have to be out there. You don't have to be out there and make tweets about how I've just spent 80 hours analyzing the demos of everybody, and here's a picture of the boot camp, I'm getting the boys in line. Like, he's just doing it. Like, he's just doing, he's got his system. He's not making mega baller statement. He's always to the point. He's always honest in the good ones, the good moments, the bad moments. He stays true to whatever the fuck he's doing, and he's just putting in the work. And eventually down the line, it pays off again and again with different lineup, again and again. And this is why in the moment, could he ball out a bit more? Yeah, probably. I think his Instagram is a nice little, like, subtle way to just remind everybody.
Yeah, play it up a bit. Exactly.
He's got this way to play it up. But at the end of the day, what really matters is the work he's putting in, the result he's getting. And when you look at his entire coaching career, you start to understand, like, he's kind of in a category of his own with, like, ZywOo. Like, these are kind of the two coaches that have become more than just coaches. They've reached new heights. And yeah, the real work is silent. Like, you don't need to scream about it. Like, just do the work. And he does it. And he's got a system and it works. And his understanding of the game is ever evolving. And he's always at the top of it. It's like, holy shit. Respect. I respect what Blade is doing.
I'll give people a little bit of flavour, actually, like Chad was hinting at there, of also what he's actually like beyond just on camera, because he's actually a very interesting guy. And it's not that he's pretending not to be. It's just that when he really is all about business. When he's like one of the ultimate professionals to me. Like, he's a guy who just got, it's a bit like what I always used to say about Existence. You might have your own opinions, but he's one of the great model professionals of all time. Always turned up, always looked like he was prepared, said the right things, never was like rude to people, just did his job fantastically. But to crack them and to know them as a person, you have to get to know them privately, obviously. There's two things I'll tell you. One, I did think it was fucking hilarious, and it hints at it, guys, when ESL did that video, Chad, last year, the one where it was like about how, like, Simple and Blade are gonna, like, break down your demos or whatever if you, like, you join Navi, and it was like that whole thing of him, like, the mask, what is this? Like, that was fucking hilarious. Like, it actually was fire. And then the other thing is, this is how you know, this is such a mad self-indulgent point, but it's on brand, so here we go. This is how you know Blade is a genius, Sponge, because one thing Simple actually admitted to me when he was, like, doing his private mea culpa for flaming me and saying he would expose me as a piece of shit when he retires. Spoiler, won't do that. If anything, as I told him, I'll expose him, but don't worry about that. So when he was trying to do his mea culpa, one thing he told me to make it not seem as bad that he flamed me, Chad, is he told me that actually, this is no joke, that Simple himself, by the way, will claim to you, he says he doesn't have very good English. He has conversational English, everyone knows that, and he's obviously played a team. But he is someone who, if you talk like about something very in-depth very quickly, he can sometimes be like, can you slow down a bit, or what did he say there? You know, he said sometimes he doesn't always get all the things, but he told me that in the past, if he ever, like, saw a tweet of mine, he didn't understand, he would just ask Blade, and Blade would be like, oh, here's what he means by that, and explain, like, the tweet. So all I'm going to say, guys, is Blade's on a level even Simple isn't. Like, Simple can't understand a Thorin tweet, so he has to get Blade to be like, what does it mean? He's like, oh, I'll dumb it down for you, Simple. What he's saying about ZywOo is, you know, so anyway, whatever. So there's that. And then, as I say, like, I actually do think low-key. That's, by the way, now we're thinking about it, if there's anyone I want to see a documentary about, it's fucking Blade, mate. That would be fire. Imagine one that could cover his whole career and have all people coming in. Because one thing I'll throw in here as well, that's why I brought him up, is remember the rep he had at the end of being a player when he was still in IGL? People used to sometimes say, maybe he should be the one to replace Zeus. And at the time, all the top players in their scene were like, no, he's all out of date, and he's doing all, like, kind of like an MSL Existence diss. Like, he's doing, you know, from spawn strats in 20XX or whatever, you know, whatever year they think that's out of date already. But He definitely has leveled his game up. Because another thing about a Blade team is, this is the one that, normally with coaches and IGLs, it's hard to know what impact they're having. Dude, I think a Blade team is one of the easiest to see the impact he's having. They all start playing that like super tight style. They clearly have like a structure that they stick to more heavily. Like, I do think he's someone you can see his fingerprints on the team.
I agree. I try to think of other coaches which I give a lot of credit to the way a team plays. I think for ZywOo, unfortunately, recent times are kind of marring that with the Falcons in terms of just we're not getting any output from them, so that kind of sucks. The conversation there for him, I don't want to say it's over, but I just want to kind of think it ends with the Vitality major win, and like we'll see what happens in the future. But another one who's a little bit surprising is Ash. I think Ash has
the Gamer Legion guy.
Yeah, and obviously they're not at the point of like lifting.
Was it Gamer Legion or was it Into the Breach? Which was it? Was it Into the Breach he was with?
Gamer Legion.
Was it Gamer Legion?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
He's still there. But that's the thing. The pieces that they get and then the type of Counter-Strike that they play, they're another team that plays good team CS.
Oh, they've rebuilt a few times now. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It's true.
And that Slend kid, I reckon, is one of those names who...
A lot of players think he actually is for real, like going to be mega, by the way, that Slend guy. A lot of the lower coaches are telling me they think he's for real. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Liquid, if they can get him, they should try and get that kid. But yeah, Ash is another name that, like, obviously not on the same level as a Blade, but it is hard with coaches, right? Like, you look at the list, and
what about Cyclone? Where do we put Cyclone on that? What he's done with the bunch of
He's got to be doing something.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit harder because whenever we get to talk to him, the vibe I'm getting is that he's mentored them as a group. Like he's taken these kids and he's helped them reach like the professional status, and he's helped them through all of the challenges that you have to go through in order to establish yourself at the high. We don't really give him a whole lot of tactical credit. Like we don't do that. Yeah, I don't know whether that's warranted or not, but he's not in that conversation. But in terms of like accompanying players, and if we have to actually just take credit of the improvement of a group, you're looking at a MOUZ NXT that's now an actual contender to win trophies, and that is with Cyclone. So maybe
I'll give you an angle, Maniac. Here's why I can almost infer he must have done more than people think. Because people always forget with the current MOUZ team, because they know most of them win MOUZ NXT. They act as though they just all they came up piece by piece. Remember, they initially added like Torji and JDC, and they already, by the way, made that Cologne like playoffs run. That was before Exertion came, guys. Then Exertion, who actually most of us thought was the best player of MOUZ NXT, he came afterwards. Then they were also quite relevant. They could make like top at the IM Rio, etc. That sort of run. Then people have to remember they only got Shuhei about a year ago. Like he actually has. It can't just be like Shuhei's the genius, or like it's because you've got really good players. I agree, mate. There has to be some degree to which this guy was like tweaking things behind the scenes. Because the other thing that is very impressive is his story's crazy. Because remember, he wasn't a coach who came to he was the academy coach. He was the academy coach, and they sort of promoted him. By the way, when you do a move like that, I would say someone like me on a show will be very cynical, Dominic. Will this guy make it? Maybe he was better at the lower level. Maybe he needed his players. He brought his players through one by one. By the way, in the meantime, he did stuff like stopgap people like Dexter. He had some pretty good results from him, but he almost won a fucking tournament. Like, I agree. Again, it's hard to know exactly what they've done, but they must have done something. Like, a guy's the only thread through all the players.
I think something else that's a boon, especially for a guy like Cyclone, is he was playing professionally not that long ago when you consider some of the coaches out there. Like he was last playing in like 2021, obviously just with Danish teams or whatever. Sure. But I think that buys you a lot of respect, especially with younger players. If they didn't know anything about you, you go, oh shit, like this guy actually gets it. Like he's been in the server. So I think that's a good thing to have, because he's 28, like he's not ancient or anything, but he's got somewhat recent playing experience. He also then had a good group. One of the things that I've always said with this MOUZ group is just how mature they seem for a team that could just be a bunch of like stupid kids fucking around all the time. They take it seriously. So something has been curated with them from an early age. That this is big business, and if that's definitely how he has to play a big role in that. But
you'd assume he'd be part of it, right? Like the philosophy of the team, like you'd assume he'd have something to say.
It just is this is the thing. I don't know how we ever get there, but we will. The coaches are going to be the most tight-lipped out of all of it, because that is their entire worth, is all of the things of how they view the game, or what structure they bring, or what the that's why when we sit there and we want to talk to them, we're getting nothing other than face value conversations. And it's so difficult to try and get anything out of them to learn what they truly do. And then with how tight-lipped the teams are onto the comms, it's great to see some of these guys like Carrigan obviously putting out his own comm videos and stuff. Oh,
it's fire. Yeah.
It does help a little bit. But, you know, any little bit we get like that is how we try and piece this puzzle together. And, you know, it's not even half the picture, which it's a real shame because unless your players talk highly of you as a coach and if you're not winning, you don't get any cred at all. Like, how could you?
Oh, by the way, the best thing, unironically, that almost any top team IGL can do for their coach is just give them a shout out at the interview. Just say like, oh, you know, he really helped us on H there, or, you know, on that round, actually, that was something he told me to look out for and I called it. If you even just do that once or twice, people will remember it in these conversations. It'll go a long way. Yeah.